Hello, everyone, and welcome to our dear guest, Michael. Michael, this is truly the most meaningful and important video I have been trying to create and publish for years, and thanks to you, it is finally happening. Really, I am happy about it. I really appreciate you being with us today to explore the ins and outs of job application from perspective of top hiring manager like you. Every job seekers like me is curious about what's happening behind the scenes on the hiring manager's side. What factors influence exactly the hiring process, the main reasons for rejection, interview failures, resume issues, or cover letter, and especially not receiving any interview invitation or job offers. Today, we are going to cover all of these through more than 85 questions. I will bombard you with lots of questions in this regard, and I am sure that we couldn't find anyone better than you in this regard, really. And I'm not going to bore the followers with a lengthy introduction, and the floor is yours to introduce yourself, especially regarding your experience about hiring process, and let us know if our viewers, if they wish to be in contact with you, how they can access you. Then we will start step by step the question. Please go ahead.
Well, first of all, I want to thank you as well, because as you said, I think this is a very important conversation to have for many individuals who are in the job market, who are seeking opportunities to understand what the hiring manager is looking for, what the companies are looking for, some best practices, and maybe even to debunk some potential myths that we have, right? So it sounds like for 85 questions today, I'll be the one being interviewed, so I'm happy to do it. It's a very fun opportunity. So a little about myself. I've been in the HR space for the better part of just over 20 plus years. I started my career in talent management and talent recruitment. I've done it for many years throughout all my opportunities within the organizations I worked for, whether that be in automotive or sports retail or even medical. All of which kind of share the same similarities in what they look for in individuals. And we're going to talk a little bit about that in a little bit more great detail. And again, I just hope everyone gets an opportunity to really take something from this and this value. And if they want to get in touch with me, we can put it up maybe in the description later on through my personal email, and of course through LinkedIn and my company Synchros HR.
Thanks for your concise and great introduction. Exactly. As you mentioned, I will put all the information on the video job description. We will have some question regarding general hiring philosophy and priorities, about 11 questions. Then about the main part, maybe resume, cover letter, and application process. After that, we will have some question, lots of questions, 22, about interview process. And also after that, about post-interview and hiring decisions and additional insights. It is a kind of wrap up. First, we are going to talk about general hiring philosophy and priorities. It is a kind of introduction. Before going on, I want to say that each slide I have brought the main question, because when you are talking, everybody knows that exactly what is going on, the main question. And for my Farsi followers, maybe their English is not, some of them are not so advanced. So I have brought the Farsi translation for them to follow up. And under each question, I have brought a tip which can help better understand the topic. Each hints are related to the question. Okay, if you are ready, we can go and start with the first question. What are the top qualities you look for in a candidate when reviewing applications?
Well, it's a good question, and I think to start off, just to maybe understand when a recruiter is looking for the top qualities in a candidate, they've already done the behind the scenes work with the hiring manager to understand really what they're looking for in their top candidate. A lot of it will be a mix and match between tactical qualities relating to the job. And then there are going to be some soft, kind of behavioral qualities that they look for as it relates to either the department, the division, or even the organization. So example of this would be if I was hiring for, say, a financial analyst. Well, obviously the top qualities I'm looking for is someone who has depth of experience in analytics, who's got a well-versed tactical experience within Excel, within SAP perhaps, etc. When it comes to the type of qualities, when it comes to behavioral or what they call competencies, that's where the hiring manager really wants to get an understanding of the type of individual they want to bring into their team. So that could be someone who is who's very detail oriented, who's diligent, and a lot of those qualities they're going to devise out of that resume screen and more specifically out of the interview. So I know when we go deeper into the conversation later on around what would be an optimal looking resume, remember, when you're talking about certain jobs that are really going to cater to the type of qualities you want to portray of yourself, it's going to show up in your resume, such as I mentioned, detail oriented or diligence in some of the experience, and even how your resume looks.
Okay, thank you. And next question. How do you prioritize hard skills versus soft skills? And has this changed over the time?
So it can change over time depending on the level of role that the interview or the company is hiring for. So hard skills and soft skills are equally important, I would say. Where this can change is if I'm hiring for an entry level position, I'm looking more for the hard skills because this individual is going to have less of a strategic accountability and more of a tactical accountability. So if we're talking about a junior analyst or a coordinator, administrative type of role, a large amount of their role or their job is going to require hands-on functional and tactical abilities, which are the hard skills. Now, if I start to look at a candidate or a particular individual or role that is more on the senior side, so at management level, senior management, even director role, the soft skills are more critically important because this individual will have to actually not only be well versed on the hard skills, but they have to be a visionary. They'll have to be able to work cross-functionally amongst different business units. They're going to have to work with C-suite on strategy and long-term planning. This requires a lot of collaboration. This requires a lot of influence. This requires a lot of negotiation. And that's where the soft skills come in. So that, I guess, shift between a junior to a senior role and what actually is the higher priority has never changed over time. It actually continues going. But as you progress within your career, that is where you'll start to see the shift in the emphasis of hard skills versus soft skills.
Okay, thank you. Actually, I have lots of questions in this regard, but I am not going to make this because we have
Maybe
lots
a
of
follow-up
questions.
video.
Yes, make it so lengthy. So we can go to the third question. How do you balance technical expertise with adaptability and willingness to learn?
I think it's a great question. And I think the emphasis around adaptability and willingness to learn should be a constant no matter what type of role you're in and what type of company you're in or how you shift through your career. Uh, excuse me, the companies will evolve, technology evolves, the way we work is going to evolve. We're seeing this now with in the recent years with ChatGPT. If you go back, say, 20 plus years, we saw that with the invention and the adoption of the internet. How we work is critically important and how we are able to adopt and that willingness to learn. You should always be looking to evolve your skills. You should always be looking to evolve your adaptability and how you approach things in a much more efficient way as the market continues to shift. So I would definitely say the adaptability and the willingness to learn is a higher priority, but your tactical fundamentals should always be a constant. So I think they're equally important, but how you flex them at different times can be also important.
Okay, thank you. Well put in. Thank you. Next question. Are there new qualities or competencies you prioritize now compared to earlier in your career? For example, adaptability, as you mentioned, digital literacy, emotional intelligence, and so on.
This is such a good question, and I think it really is relevant to what we kind of already just discussed in the sense of, as you progress within your career, you're going to have to now develop new skills and flex new, for lack of a better term, muscles when it comes to how you present yourself and how you work within the organization. I think, your ability to be emotionally intelligent is a highly sought skill for most in organizations because the ability to, prioritize but deal with the potential chaos that comes with the day to day. I mean, you might be having conflicting priorities. You might have maybe bosses that are having a bad day. You might have colleagues that are having a bad day. You got to be able to adapt and you got to be able to keep yourself calm under that pressure. I think that's a big one. The digital literacy is also a great one that you highlighted here. We've seen, I mentioned earlier, the ChatGPT advent that's been coming into business, and it's going to become more prevalent and more part of our integrated day to day sooner than we all think. not just in business, but in just day-to-day life. So the sooner we can get more comfortable with this type of new technology, the sooner we can understand it and how it works to optimize, how you can bring your skills through that technology is so important. I think your overall ability of how you can just talk about adaptability, as we mentioned earlier, you're going to, working with a new sense of skills and new sense of delivery is always going to be important for how you can adapt to the success and promote that within your career.
Okay, thank you. And I have a short question here.
Sure.
Do you see any distinct difference between flexibility and adaptability?
Not particularly. I mean, flexibility is more your agreeableness. So, you want to be able to, again, it really all depends on the role and the situation, right? I know I've been saying that a lot, but it is true. So an example, an individual in my role as an HR senior leader, I have to be able to be flexible in the sense of understanding what are the needs of the business, what are the needs of the employees, and so I kind of meet in the middle. And sometimes that requires me to be agreeable. Sometimes that requires me to push back in a respectful and diplomatic way. Adaptability is very similar in that sense, where you have to be versatile and well-versed on a lot of different areas. But you always have to, I guess, understand where you need to be more agreeable and where you need to be able to respectfully push back when it's required.
Thank you. Okay, next question. What role does emotional intelligence play in your assessment? You mentioned some of them, but exactly we are going to read this.
I think it just, I may have stomped on this question earlier when I was talking about it before, but I mean, the emotional intelligence piece is critical, right? Especially as you get into more senior roles. Your ability to, what we call in the business, bring people along, which is when you're trying to negotiate and influence decision makers or the business or managers or employees, whoever it is that you're talking about here, you want them to want to follow what you're proposing. You want them to buy in. You want them to understand and see the value of what you're proposing. To have to force that is not really the win that you're looking for. What you're looking for is, and a lot of that comes from like how you deliver, how you stay calm under pressure, how you're seen as a leader. Because when you're looked upon as the individual who's calm under pressure, who's the lighthouse in that storm where your team and your company can rely on, that's a reflection of your emotional intelligence. So understanding the behaviors in yourself of how you can keep calm and keep that pleasant working demeanor is very important for a lot of talent acquisition specialists. But I'd say it's one of the more critical pieces, especially in senior leadership.
Great, that's very informative. And next question. How do you assess a candidate's strengths in Casper's core competencies? For example, collaboration, communication, empathy, ethics, all the information that our users can see under the slide. Yeah, go on, please.
Yeah, so understand that when we're talking about candidate strengths, when we're talking about the interview process, we're really only seeing a very small window in regards to how someone's behaviors and their competencies play out. So as you present yourself, you want to be able to, kind of present yourself with these aspects in mind. And that's really going to come across in how you answer your questions, your body language, your presenteeism. The full scope of understanding a candidate's competencies is not going to really play out until, as you start to get successfully into that company and you start to conduct yourself through your work. But when we're looking at interviews and we're looking at individuals, I'm usually there with a hiring manager beside me, sometimes two. And as we're going through the questions, I'm critically studying how they're answering the questions, their verbal dialogue, their ability to be calm and really communicate with efficiency. But also and don't get me wrong, I mean, plenty of people get nervous in interviews. I totally understand that. And my job to be in that room is to make you as comfortable and as calm as possible so I can get that true reflection. But overall, we're trying to get a small sense of what that looks like. And we're trying to understand how well you can communicate, and your ability to communicate your examples of work will highlight some of these competencies.
Absolutely, that makes sense, really. How do you evaluate communication skills in candidates?
This is a good question. So my one key area that and there's a lot of different areas, but the one key one that I think we'll touch on a little bit later on is how you answer a question with context. So oftentimes when I'm working with candidates and I'm interviewing them, I'm looking for a story. I'm looking for to understand what it is that you did, what are the actions you took, and then where people fall short is what happened afterwards. So what was the result of the actions that you
And
took?
these are actually memorable, yeah?
Yes, Andre, absolutely. So you want to be able to, when you're telling a story, when you're talking about an example, and we've all been in those interviews where tell me about a time when you did, and then fill in the blank. I want to be able to look to you, Akbar, and say, can I get a sense that you're recalling from memory, or are you embellishing or making up the story as you go along? That's a big no-no. You're on the latter, right? So all to say
Exactly. There
is,
is another question in this regard.
yes,
Rehearsing,
yes, but we'll
rehearsing.
touch
Yeah,
on
we
that
will
for
go on.
sure.
Yeah, you go on, please. Sorry, interrupting you. Yeah, go
Yeah,
on.
but all to say is, the ability for an individual to communicate effectively is a critical assessment piece for me when I'm interviewing applicants.
Thank you. Interesting. And what soft skills impress you most during the hiring process? We talked about soft skills versus hard skills, but here specifically, I am going to know exactly what soft skills really impress you most.
Right. So I think we touched on it or alluded to it in the previous slide, being communication being the utmost, because regardless of the type of role that you're in, regardless of your role within the organization and its interaction, your ability to communicate is going to be a constant. An additional one is your critical thinking. So the ability to think dynamically and critically is a skill in and of itself that is wildly important for every organization, for every hiring manager, even if they may not verbalize it. What they need is someone who can, because there's very few roles that are very transactional and that deviate free of issues and free of problems. But when those problems come up, what the hiring manager is really looking for is, can I count on Michael? Can I count on Akbar to be able to, think through the problem critically, think through the next 2, 3, 4 steps of what that solution might look like and how it's going to be. And because they don't want to, get involved in every single issue. So I would say communication and critical thinking are by far the top skills I always look for in a top candidate.
Exactly. And I can add a point that maybe based on the job description, for example, a
Absolutely.
kind of job description needs creativity. So it is much better to put emphasis in this regard. Do you agree?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I agree. I think when you're reviewing the job description, you want to be able to adjust your resume as needed and adjust your interview skills as required, like to highlight the critical points that they're looking for. I agree.
Great. How important is cultural fit and how do you assess it without allowing bias, like race, religion,
Right.
gender, and so on?
Absolutely. So I think the first aspect what we have to address is when we talk about cultural fit, we're not talking about race, religion, and gender and anything of that sort. What we're actually talking about from a company point of view is the culture of the organization as to what they hold dear to the organization. So that could be, whether it's goal orientation, whether it's the ability to collaborate and be a team that's unified. So when they're looking at individuals who are looking to join their team, really what they're looking for is someone who has a moral compass that aligns with their cultural values. So that is independent of any type of bias. Now, does the potential for bias exist in any day to day? I'm sure it does. I can say with a 100% certainty in the companies that I've worked for, we have never had to run into that problem. I've never worked with a hiring manager, thankfully, in my entire 20 plus year career, who had a bias around race, religion, or gender. I'm not suggesting it doesn't exist out there because I'm sure there are, unfortunate examples where it does. But when we're talking about a cultural fit, we're talking about the individuals who are the hiring managers who are looking to bring individuals in who align to their not only existing culture, but one that they're looking to build for the long term.
Okay, thank you. What behaviors or attitudes turn you off immediately? It is a very important question.
Yeah, that's a good question. So I think there's a fine line between confidence and smugness, or I guess cockiness, or in being in that when you present yourself as an individual who is beyond the process or is bothered by the process or bothered by the questions, it is an immediate turnoff. Adversely, if someone who is either ill-prepared and not taking it seriously is also a turnoff. So I think, when you want to really kind of present yourself as someone who not only is prepared, but is humble through the process as well. You can have a lot of confidence in your skills. You can, and I encourage everyone to have that confidence in what you bring to the table, but balance that with humility. I think that's the key that, a lot of people will pick up on and appreciate when you're in that interview process.
Okay, amazing. Okay. Can you describe any red flags that might disqualify an applicant early on?
Sure. So when we're talking about disqualifying an applicant early on, I think we're talking about the application process, so what your resume looks like, right? And I think there's two things that can be pretty an immediate, I guess, red flag is when there's inconsistencies in your resume. And what I mean by that is, are there grammatical errors? Are there actual spelling errors? Formatting, things of that sort. So I think, when we're talking about those inconsistencies on the visual appearance of your resume, and if you're in the ability to actually get into the, an interview process, you want to be able, like I said, you want to be able to speak through your abilities with a clear and succinct and concise manner. So someone who is maybe going on way too long, explaining way too much with too much detail, or not enough, being overly succinct, you want to find that right balance. So what it shows me, and the reason why it's a red flag, is that it tells me that you haven't really fully prepared for this conversation.
And in the next chapter, we are going to talk about resume, cover letter, application process. First, we will have some question regarding resume. What makes a resume stand out within 30 seconds?
Great question. So the immediate thing that what stands out for me is when it's very organized. And we're going to show an example, I think, later on, where we'll see two resumes with equal content, but what each other will look like and how it separates each other out. When it's organized and it's not overly cluttered, it's much easier to read. So that's the first thing. The second thing is, are the headings in there where I can skim through, okay, education, experience, professional skills, maybe their certifications or the technology that they've worked on. So is it very clear, concise, and clean for me to look at optically is the very first thing that makes sense to me. And it really will stand out. Things, we'll talk a little bit more about this in the next coming slides, and I'll elaborate more on some of what these are.
Okay, thank you. And which section do you prioritize first? Education, skills, experience, etc. When you are looking through the resume?
Absolutely. Yeah, it's a great question. So I think so for me, it's experience. Now, recruiters all kind of work in very different ways. What I've always done is I understand the job I'm hiring for like the back of my hand. I've studied it. I've worked with the hiring manager. I've done my discovery meetings and understood what they're looking for. So what I'm looking for is first of all, the experience. So are their experiences aligned to what I am looking for? And that could be either someone who's already doing the job, and this would be a lateral move over if they were successful coming over, or someone who's been working towards a progression in their career and they're ready for that next step, which I'm potentially offering them in this role. So the experience is critical. From there, the skills kind of go hand in hand in that, because what I'm seeing in that experience is I can start to get an assessment of the type of skills that they have. So the type of work that they've done, whether they've done detailed analytics, whether they've done strategy, vision, etc. The education piece is probably the lowest on my criteria, unless I'm looking for very specific credentials. And the reason I say this is usually your experience will offset the education piece that you may have done 10, 20 years ago. And it's great. Don't get me wrong. Education is important. I'm a very big advocate of it. But when I'm looking at your experience and I see that you're maybe at a manager level and the last time you did some education was perhaps, when you graduated with a BA or an MBA, 10 to 15 years ago, that's great. It's a value add, but it's not going to be the highest priority on my list.
Okay, thank you. How long do you typically spend reviewing a resume exactly? Because I have heard 10 seconds, 20 seconds.
No, it's definitely not that low. So I go through a couple of different phases of resume review. So if I'm hiring for a job, keep in mind that if I'm hiring for when I post a role over the course of like say a month, that role might receive anywhere between 100 to 200 applicants. So I'm reviewing all these and I'm spending probably about a good 15 to 20 seconds per resume at the initial part, just checking off, okay, I need to skim through to understand, okay, where are they on their experience level? What do they have a couple of areas that are catching my eye on the experience piece that I can then put them into the yes column where and at that point, when I start to take that, say 200 batch of resumes, I've now condensed it down to 50. And from those 50, now I'm going to spend a little bit more time reviewing it. So I'm going to go through it again. I'll probably spend a good maybe 5 to 10 minutes going through it, circling maybe some areas I want to do. And from those 50, I'm probably going to condense it down to about 15 to 20 that I'm now going to be reaching out and talking to.
Okay, good point. Thank you. Do you prefer chronological, functional, or hybrid formats?
So chronological, 100%. It's much easier to follow, and it makes more sense on the hiring manager side to understand it and kind of what that trajectory of experience has been. So keep in mind, what we're trying to understand is not only the most current experience that you're working with and all the great things like skills and functionality that the individual presents, but we want to see that story. Where did you start and how it flowed up in reverse chronological order? So I think chronological is by far the most important.
Thank you. How important is tailoring a resume to each job posting?
I would say pretty important. So here, and let me give you some reasons why I'm not 100% sold on tailoring it for every job posting, but I would recommend having multiple different resumes. It really depends on what you're looking for, right? So the type of resume that you should have, your standard, generalized format resume that will be kind of your starting ground.
You mean that having a master resume that having
Exactly.
all the details? Yeah, okay.
Yes. And then from there, if you're seeing a job posting that you think could you'd be better served to highlight certain areas, create a version of that and have that, really fine-tuned, and that would be your presented resume. Like typically you would have 2 or 3 versions. It's not uncommon for that. Having a one master catch-all version, you can get success with that. I'm not saying that's not possible, but I would always recommend custom tailoring your resume in a couple of different ways, depending on the end goal that you're seeking.
Okay, thank you. And the next question, what are common mistakes that get a resume rejected?
That's a good question. So common mistakes, I think, we touched on a little bit on those, like where there's inconsistencies on the resume, whether they're grammatical or spelling. Missing dates would be another one, or but a formatting, when the resume is in Word, that can be a problem. And the reason I mean, because all resumes should be built in Word, but when you're applying, I would always recommend applying in PDF form in your resume, because when you apply in Word, the version that you have versus the version that the employer might have might like skew the formatting of your resume, and that could end up getting rejected because it makes it seem like they're not understanding that it could be a formatting or a version issue.
What about JPEG picture? Some people send it as a picture.
I would not recommend JPEGs. No, I think when you're building your resume in Word, a quick save as a PDF and keeping both of those files on your desktop would be recommended, because the PDF version is your clean, uneditable version that you are then putting forward as your master.
And be sure that you have attached it, because some people
Yeah.
send the letter but they forget actually to attach the file.
Yes,
How do
good
you
point.
assess non-traditional career paths or employment gaps?
So I think those, like when I assess them in my conversation with the individual. I never typically, I don't, not typically, I just don't make judgment calls on those type of employment gaps because they can happen for a variety of reasons. I mean, whether you're taking time off to build a family, whether you're taking time off to immigrate to a new country, whether you're taking time off for education, all those things can happen. So if I'm seeing an individual's resume and their skills and experience align with what I'm looking for, and they might have a gap of a few years or even a few months, wherever that time is, I'm still going to put them in the yes column. I'm still going to reach out to them and have a conversation, but it would be a point I bring up and just quickly ask them, I see there's a gap in your resume. Maybe you can help me understand, kind of what took place here. And usually it's a pretty straightforward, simple response, and one of the ones I've made mention of earlier, and that's good to go.
Okay. How do you evaluate international degrees and experience? For example, somebody from Iran. Does
Mhm.
listing international education or experience create bias?
No, it does not. No, at least not in my experience and over my 20 plus year career. International experience is just as valuable and it's equal to anything that we have within Canada. Where I will put a caveat in is depending on the type of role that you're seeking, it might require Canadian experience. So what I mean by that is, so in certain professions, you need accreditation and you need to have that certification of your credentials to come over to Canada because the laws are different and the applications are different. If I were to personalize this even in my own profession, if I were to look at someone as a candidate within HR, their international experience matters. But when I'm looking, depending on the type of role, I need them to be well versed on Canadian employment law, labor laws, health and safety laws. And while those can be learned on the job and those can be learned in tandem by doing the job, it really just depends on the depth of that experience. So it's not a straight yes or no. I would say it is free from bias. It would not hinder you to have education and experience from a different country coming into Canada. But it would be also a preparation of understanding that depending on what you are applying for could require an equivalency of knowledge and accreditation to the Canadian platform.
Okay. Can we put in this way that at the end you have two clients exactly equal, and only the difference is this part, international degrees. In this regard, what will you do?
It's a tough question because again, it really requires the depth of experience, right? Like I've hired individuals within my team who have not had Canadian experience, but I did see something in them that was very promising in their ability to present themselves in that interview. We have many individuals that work within the companies I've worked for that have been successful and outperformed Canadian domestic applicants for that very reason. So it's not a black and white, I would say. It's again how you present yourself in the interview, how you are able to communicate your skills and experience, and really at the end of the day, how are you presenting your value as the top candidate for that role?
So there is no worry, because I have heard lots of
No.
clients and YouTube video tutorials say that hide this part, and as you mentioned, there is no worry in this regard.
No, I think, there's going to, unless you're in the room making the decision, behind the scenes like myself or with the hiring manager, you're not really going to fully know what's prompting their decision. So what I would caution is people jumping to conclusions and sharing that opinion as fact. Like I said, we have many examples, too many to even name, where we have individuals who have come here into our organizations that have either minimal or no Canadian experience who have dramatically outperformed though their counterparts in the interview process. It has nothing to do with their abilities whatsoever from a different country.
Okay, I appreciate that insight. Thank you so much. What's your advice for applicants who worry about appearing overqualified?
So, the one area that when I start to look at individuals who are quote unquote overqualified, like I guess we're talking about two different areas, right? The one area is if they're skills are feeling like they feel that their skills are overqualified for the job or their level is overqualified for the job. The latter being the like whether your level is overqualified for the job is a little bit of a red flag. And here's where I would say this. So if you are a director level experience, your most recent role, maybe your last 2, 3 roles were at director level, and I see you apply for a manager level job, it's going to raise questions. It's going to raise questions as to why you're so willing to take 2 to 3 steps below the hierarchy process. And obviously, from a compensation standpoint, would you even be satisfied with that drop in your application? So that's one I wouldn't say red flag, but one area that might kind of maybe question, what the intent is behind it.
Sorry, in this point, how
Yes.
can they tailor this part if they want?
Well, I mean, I would never suggest tailoring your experience in regards to what that is. And maybe the offset to that is explain that if you choose to submit a cover letter and maybe giving them context as to why they're deviating away from their previous trajectory, that could be the value offset to that. But if we're talking about your skills and experience, understand that you can be depending on the type of company you work for. So let's take 2 equal companies. However, the role that you play in company one is very transactional, it's very day to day, and you don't really deviate outside of your lane of your job. But the other company, equal job, but because of the way it's structured, you're able to touch a lot of different areas that are beyond your job scope. You're able to do a lot more depth of experience. Don't be afraid to put those experiences on your resume because that actually is very valuable because that speaks to the diversity, the flexibility, the critical thinking, all those great competencies we talked about earlier. And it doesn't necessarily mean you're overqualified, it just means your depth of experience is greater.
Thank you. Okay. Continue. As I mentioned, this question regarding high qualified. What are your recommendations for highly qualified or expert level candidates when applying for general or entry level jobs? How can they position themselves effectively without appearing overqualified? Because most of them are newcomers and
Yeah.
they want to have a supply job. What is your recommendation in this regard?
Well, I mean, this is a tough one because I mean, when you're that highly qualified or expert level job and you're looking for an entry level job, I think, the context behind why you're doing that matters, and it's going to help offset maybe some of the questions or the apprehension that the recruiter or the company might have when reviewing your resume, and that's where the cover letter comes in. Or even in the summary statement of your resume where you could be very clear about what you are seeking is to gain an entry level position, as a new applicant within the Canadian market. Those can be certain things, certain aspects that will help, really kind of preemptively answer the questions that recruiters or the company might have if you're that overqualified.
Uh, I have a question in this regard
Sure.
because most of the clients usually omit their advanced education. For example, if they have a PhD or a master or bachelor, based on the job description, only put for example, diploma or any education that it is necessary.
Mhm.
Is it good point or not?
Well, I would always recommend, not being deceitful or deceiving in your resume,
It is
right?
not a deceiving. They are
No, no. What I mean
okay.
by that is, the experience that you've had, the education that you've had. My recommendation is always to have it in there. I wouldn't purposely leave it out to accommodate because I think what you're looking for is, you never know what can happen, right? Because when you're seeing an opportunity that you can apply for, no one is very sure as to what the employer is looking for. So that information is valuable regardless of, what the job description might say. If you have a PhD from another country, the recruiters here understand that, while when an individual transitions from one country to Canada, regardless of where it is, there could be opportunities where they have to really kind of take a step back, reshape, and acclimate to the Canadian market to get back to where, to the level that they're accustomed to. And there's nothing wrong with that. And it's not looked down upon here at all by any stretch. So, but you never know that the organization you be working with that you're applying to, you could potentially grow within that organization, and they might look to you with longevity as in mind, considering the fact that you have all these accolades. So leaving them out is not what I would recommend.
Okay, thank you. I hope that all hiring managers watch our video and
I
have
hope
this
so
mindset
too.
too. Yeah, exactly. Okay, how do you view freelance, contract, and or gig work?
It's a good question. This could be a tricky one, right? It depends on, I think it depends on the story your resume shows, right? Because again, and really what you're applying for. If you're applying for more freelance work, then it's a non-issue, right? But if you're applying for a permanent role and the individual sees that you've done 6 months here, 1 year here, 3 months here, one of the key aspects that they're going to immediately question is, well, is Michael really serious about sticking around, or is he going to be bored with what this is and move on to the next thing? So how do we offset that? Well, we talk about, similar to what we talked about earlier, which was, in your cover letter or in your summary statement, where you're looking to build your roots within an organization for the longevity and build more progressively within the organization. That is, one key area that you can make mention of. So that way it helps offset those questions that the recruiters might have.
Okay, appreciate it. Do you value volunteer experience or community involvement when reviewing applications?
I do. I wouldn't say it's the immediate thing I look for. As I said, that's more on the experience. But as I start to evaluate the resume in more detail, and as I get to know the individual through the interview process, that volunteer experience actually is critical. It can become critical. Like I've interviewed individuals who have worked within volunteer community-based experiences where they've been able to draw some examples from those experiences in the interview questions themselves, and it actually worked out really well. Because remember, the experience in general is valuable, no matter where you're getting it, whether it's volunteer, whether it's community involvement, or you're being paid to get it. Either way, you can draw from great examples that will actually help and aid you. And also, if you remember what we talked about earlier, is the company, when it talked about its cultural fit, they're looking for someone who has a moral compass that aligns with their cultural values, what they hold dear. And if your volunteer experience actually aligns with that, it only helps you.
I think that the most important part you said at the end, if the volunteer experience relate to the job that you are applying, because I have seen in some culture they think that if they put lots of volunteer job that show that they are a good person,
Mhm.
it works. What is your idea in this regard?
Well, I wouldn't say, I mean, you can be a great person, but if you're not qualified for the job, you're not going to get the job, right? So I think I think there's a lot of people out there who are taking on volunteer work, not for necessarily what it can gain them later on, but just simply because it's meaningful to them. And it doesn't necessarily have to apply or it doesn't have to relate to the job that you're applying for or interviewing for. As an example, one of the recruiters on my team, when one of the examples that she recited from her church group that, of the volunteer experience that she did with her church group. It just so happened to align with the question I asked, and it was perfectly fine and an acceptable answer. And, needs to say, she's working with me now, so it didn't hinder her in any way.
Okay, thank you. How much weight do you give to certificates? I mean, online certificates like LinkedIn Learning, Coursera, and so on.
Yeah, so that's a good clarification when you talk about online certification. So recruiters understand that, there's two aspects to this. One, I would always encourage anyone to take on opportunities to educate and better their overall skills, experience, and value. But when it comes to LinkedIn Learning and Coursera, unfortunately, they don't have a lot of weight the same way it would through an accredited university or college. And the reason I say that is, so I'll dissect both quickly because I've had personal experiences with both of these organizations. LinkedIn, it's a great tool to understand the theoretical aspects of a subject because what you're really doing is you're getting a video tutorial and some script that you're going to review. You'll get to understand the theoretical, but you're not really putting forward the application process to battle test that skill. So it's like if you were to go on Google and tell me all about thermodynamics and I read for the next 2 hours, it doesn't certify me in any which way on thermodynamics. It's a very close equivalent to this. With Coursera actually does a little bit of a better job in the sense that where you're learning the content, you're applying it through some skill-based questions that they have, and it's a very valuable tool. Where it becomes a little bit of a challenge is when you're doing your testing, it's a peer-based testing system, meaning that if I'm learning a brand new subject and you are learning that exact same subject, when it comes to the testing, you and I are, without knowing, are testing each other, are testing, marking each other's tests, but we're both brand new to this subject. So again, we're not getting a vetted process and your applicability of understanding the content. So let me backtrack a quick second. I don't want to discredit LinkedIn Learning or Coursera or any other equivalents to this, like Khan Academy is also a great one that I even use myself quite often. It's great to understand the theoretical nature of the subject. Would I put it on a resume? I would not. I would not put it on mine. If someone wants to put it on theirs, that's perfectly fine. It just would not hold the same weight as someone who sought out a designation, a certification, or a diploma from an accredited institution.
Okay, thanks for clarification. Thank you. How has AI, like ChatGPT or resume scanners, changed the way you evaluate candidates? And how do you feel about resume templates or AI-generated applications?
Very great question.
Yeah,
So,
exactly.
as I mentioned, ChatGPT is quickly, gaining a lot of traction over the last few years, and it's only going to get more and more prevalent within our day-to-day lives. So, first of all, I will say I don't use ChatGPT to screen resumes. I do that personally. Did my recruitment teams. But I'm not at all unaware that when it comes to certain organizations they might use it. I think it could be a valuable tool, but I think it's still fallible. It's still new enough where you can miss the certain mark. That's why a lot of individuals like myself still actually do the human touch when it comes to reviewing resumes or screening resumes. Now, how do I feel about resume templates or AI generated applications? I think it's a great tool. So if I was an applicant, the very first thing I would be doing is, in that Word master file, upload it into ChatGPT and ask it the basic questions. Can you highlight any formatting, grammatical, or spelling errors, or any other suggestions that could be improved upon? And it will give you not only will it give you the suggestions, it will even allow you to download a version of all the edited changes. So it saves a wealth of time, and it acts as almost like a vetting system for your resume. So you can download that, and then you can adjust it the way you want, from color, from format, from structure, etc. But I think it's a great, valuable tool.
Okay, maybe I can put this question in this way that, for example, in my own regard, okay, I have lots of experience qualities, but because of lack of English proficiency, I use the ChatGPT or other tools, the templates, and when you see my resume very quickly, you can understand that, okay, it is not written by Akbar. It is written by ChatGPT or somebody has helped. Uh, does this exactly change your mindset about to
Not at
in
all.
contact with me or not? Because everything is perfectly based on my information, experience, and education. But the way that I have brought it, exactly, it shows that it is written artificially, not by myself.
Yeah, and I would say not at all, because regardless of whether English is your first language or your native tongue, someone who puts you're like so I would say a large wealth of the community of applicants all use a similar tool like ChatGPT or ChatGPT itself to vet and update and assist with their resume generation. So it would be no different for you or for I to do that same thing, because when I see this as an employer, I'm looking at this, I know like everyone's resume I know is like, I assume there's going to be some type of assistance that they're getting to put it through and make it look and sound fantastic. Really what I care about is, does the experience that I'm looking for align with what I'm looking for in this job?
The content.
Exactly. And when I meet you, you're going to be able to speak to this. You don't have to speak the way the resume is written. I just need you to clearly communicate your experience in a way that is contextual and concise. It doesn't have to align to the way ChatGPT writes.
Thank you for clarification again. Thank you. Okay, now we are going to talk about cover letter.
Absolutely.
Do you read cover letters? Why or why not? Because in one of the session I heard from you that
Yes.
you never read cover letters. Now we can deeply go through this. Okay.
Yeah. I hardly ever read cover letters, to be quite honest, because so, and that's just me. I know this is a taboo area. Maybe some recruiters might disagree with me on this
Sorry,
one.
but this doesn't mean that people don't write cover
No,
letter,
no,
because
no.
some of the job application ask, okay, please provide your cover letter too. Okay, go on.
Yeah.
Sorry, I interrupted
Yeah.
you
So
again.
understand, I mentioned earlier, when I post a job, I'm getting anywhere between 100 to 200 applicants, right? So imagine, and as I go through the resumes and I'm skimming the immediate, like say 20, 30 seconds for experience. And then, as I said, in that next step, I'm kind of spending another 5, 10, maybe even 15 minutes on a resume. I would not have the time to go through every single cover letter as well and to read a full page synopsis of the individual. And don't get me wrong, I understand that people put a lot of effort into it, and we've highlighted, how you can input information in your cover letter to offset maybe some inconsistencies, whether it's it's employment gaps or the overqualification part, as we mentioned. So I'm not suggesting do not make a cover letter. I do read cover letters every so often when I'm getting down to, like, say, the final list of my candidates that I'm or applicants that I'm looking to consider. But I cannot say I read every single cover letter because I just would not have the time.
Exactly, I do agree with you, because I think that writing cover letter is a kind of wasting time, because you can put them in interview, maybe in the interview.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
But now, because I'm going to ask some question, imagine that you are the kind of the hiring manager that you read cover letters. Okay.
Yes.
What makes a cover letter effective or memorable if you read them? Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think the easiest way to do this is, so I mean, if we go back to high school, college, when you're learning how to write an essay, what was the format, right? It was introduction, kind of the specific
Hook.
content,
They said that the
and then
hook.
and then
Yes.
closing, right? So it's basically the story that you're telling, right? The introduction is something very succinct and say, I'm very interested, and you highlight the job because I feel that the skills highlighted, or the qualifications that I have align with the skills that you require. And then in the body of that, you're going to put in, some of the experiences that you've had, and then close out with, a very succinct and short end statement to basically say, I look forward to, I hope that you find this suitable. I look forward to the opportunity to interview with your company. That's it. It doesn't have to get very, and again, ChatGPT is there to help, right? So if you were to put in your resume and then give it a prompt to basically say, write a cover letter, a one-page cover letter to summarize this for this type of role, it will spit it out in 30 seconds. So you can always do it that way as well.
But maybe the red flag, maybe it is repeating the resume. You shouldn't repeat your resume here.
Yes, it would not. Well, it wouldn't repeat it. What it would do, it would rephrase it. It would highlight the areas that you have in your entire resume, because ultimately that's what you're doing in a cover letter, right? So I wouldn't say there's any concern in putting on ChatGPT. I wouldn't say there's any concern in doing it manually. It's really preference.
Okay. How long should the cover letter be, and what should it avoid?
So I think we kind of alluded to this already. So it should be one page, no greater than that. It should avoid any type of repetition. When I say repetition, I mean word for word what you have in your resume. It should be just worded differently as a synopsis, as a story. Obviously, you want to make sure it doesn't have any spelling errors or grammatical errors, and that's again a good use of ChatGPT. And it should always include in the closing, it should include your contact information.
What about putting love story or begging?
No, so you want to keep it very just condensed to one page, very direct in regards to what you're looking for, what your experiences is, and thanking them for that opportunity in advance to apply for that job. Um, Outside of that, there shouldn't be like any type of any areas that would seem overly desperate or overly detailed in your cover letter. Your cover letter is your initial handshake. That's
Because I
say
have seen some tutorials and also some resume, they wrote them emotionally, okay, because they
yes.
want to catch the eye. Is it good or not?
No, again, we talked about emotional intelligence earlier, right? And knowing what to turn on and when. This is not an emotional conversation. This is um, for lack of a better term, a transactional one, but a personable one. So what you want to be able to do is, highlight your experiences with humility, but with confidence, and do so in a way that is just efficient in how you're putting that forward. Because remember, you're dealing with an individual on the other side of this who's reading it, who's reading that plus many others. So you want to be able just to, really showcase the experiences that you have in that cover letter in a quick way, so that way it leads them to your resume and leads that to the conversation.
Dear hiring manager, please hire me. I am a good fit.
I would
Okay.
avoid that. I would avoid that.
Can a strong cover letter make up for a weak resume or vice versa?
No, I don't think so. I think the two should be aligned. Your cover letter and your resume, and again, the more important piece of this is your resume by far. Your resume should have gone through many different versions of fine tuning and making sure that it's absolutely perfect. And your cover letter should just match that. And again, using tools like ChatGPT, using individuals in your network that can take a review of it, that would be willing to give you feedback. Those are the people and those are the tools you want to be able to use. So I wouldn't say one makes up for the other. They should be equal.
Okay, thank you. The next part, we are going to talk about online applications and portfolios. First
Yes.
question, is it more effective to apply online or in person today?
Well, I think for the most part, online applications are really kind of that make up 99% of all type of applications. Very little opportunities to apply in person the way we did, many years ago. So I would say always online. The reason being is when you apply online, it goes into their database and now they have it saved and they can actually pull it up and they can review it. When you apply online, there's way too many nuances that can happen. So first of all, if Akbar, you're the hiring manager, I come into your company and I'm looking to speak to you and looking to speak to hiring manager. Well, you might be busy, you might be in a meeting, you might be away on vacation. I may not get the chance
Or
to speak,
you are not in good mood?
or maybe you're not in a good mood. Exactly. So then if that's the case, I need to give my resume to somebody to hopefully then I rely on them to give it to you. But maybe their day got busy. Maybe they got pulled away into something and maybe you never get that resume. Always apply online.
Okay, thank you. How important is an online presence or portfolio in your industry?
In my industry, no, I wouldn't say it's critically important. I mean, your online portfolio in, let's say, the candidate market would be LinkedIn, and that's perfectly fine to have one or to not have one. It's not really that relevant, to be quite honest. Um, I would say here's the only area I would caution is, and we've seen some examples of this in my career, is what you put online can sometimes follow you many years later. So depending whether it's on Instagram, whether it's on Facebook, and all the other social media platforms, including LinkedIn, to be quite honest, how you conduct yourself on social media is of critical importance. And you never know, something can happen later on and it could be pulled and it may come back to haunt you.
Yeah, exactly. We will have some good question in this regard later.
Mhm.
Now we are going to talk about interview process. 22 question. What are key factors you use to assess a candidate during an interview?
So, as I mentioned, we want to talk about communication and we want to talk about lived experience. These are the areas that I am looking for. So, how someone is able to answer the question is the biggest key factor that I'm looking for. Because, the way a typical interview would run with me is it would be approximately about an hour. When I set up the interview with you, I'm going to tell you exactly how it's going to be laid out. I'm going to ask you to do a quick walkthrough of your resume for me. So you are presenting the story to me. From there, I'm going to get into the questions, like, tell me about a time when, or maybe even highlight some areas that I have circled on your resume. And then I'm going to close the interview by allowing 10 to 15 minutes of time where you get to lead and ask me any questions you might have. That's typically how an interview should be structured. Now, when I'm asking those questions, how you answer those questions is of critical importance. And I'm not sure if we're going to touch about it now or later, but we talk about telling the story using what we call the STAR acronym. So situation, task, action, result. I can go into it in more detail now if you like, or we can save that.
I think that we will have this question and we can talk,
Okay,
yes,
perfect.
later. Thank you. Okay, here maybe. What types of behavioral problem-solving question do you usually ask?
Well, so there's never like a typical one that I ask because it's all specific to the resume and the profile of the job I'm hiring for. So it really all depends on the skills that the job requires. So if I'm hiring for a leadership-based role, I need to know, tell me about a time when you've had to deal with conflicting strategic priorities and how this impacted not only yourself, but your team or your division. How is that handled? I'm going to ask them to really kind of give me that story. If I'm talking about a more entry to mid-level individual who's doing more tactical work, I'm going to ask them for examples of, give me an example of an experience that you had that really showcases your critical thinking, and it's much more of an open-ended question that they can draw a specific example from and tell me about it. So it really all depends.
Okay, if we talk about the percentage, how much percentage of your question is hard skills, a technical question, and how much about soft skills?
So I think it aligns to what we talked about earlier, where if you're more senior up in the role, like if I'm looking at a senior leader or a director, et cetera, I'm going to be talking about more competency-based, behavioral-based questions, less amount of tactical. Whereas if I'm looking at an entry to mid-level individual, they're going to be more tactical, they're going to be more functional, experience-based questions because that's synonymous to the job I'm hiring for.
Thank you. How should candidates prepare for behavioral questions?
Great. So this tees up what we talked about earlier, where
Yes,
in
STAR method,
so
yes.
yeah, so the STAR method, which is an acronym that stands for situation, task, action, and result. This is what we're looking for when we're looking for an answer to a behavioral based question. So when someone asks you, tell me about a time, and they fill in the blank of the specifics, what they're asking for is, okay, I need you to tell me, like, give me the story, which is what was the situation? So is it an example of where someone, someone came to you with a problem? Okay, what's that problem? What did you do about it? That's the action. What was required? So that's the task. So situation, task, action. And the last part, so you're going to explain in that situation, sorry, in that task and action piece, what was required of you and what you actually did. And then the last and most critical part is the result. How did it, like, what happened at the end? Was everything like, and it's not enough to say it's okay. What you really want to do is highlight, well, these are the actions I took. This was what was required of me. And now that it was completed, we now saw a positive result and then you elaborate on the question. So if I were to give an example where, if someone was to ask me, um, tell me about a time where you had to deal with a conflict resolution, right? My answer would be, well, during a performance review with a team member on my team, there was a big disconnect between what they thought they were performing versus what I had as my evidence of what they were performing in the job. So what I had to do was really sit down with that individual and walk them through the examples I had in which there could have been improvements on their performance, but also showcasing to them where they can get my support in those areas. Asking them questions like, what do they need from me? And how can I help them improve to be successful? The result being now that we're aligned and we have that conversation and they know that they have my support, that they don't feel judged in how they're performing, but more so they feel supported in my ability to get them where they want to be. This individual has not only increased their performance, but they're now maintaining a highly consistent level of trust in that role. In that example, you can see I've highlighted what the situation was. I showcased what I did, how I did it, and now what the result was.
Exactly. To summarize it, I can elaborate that, as you mentioned, you should give a story, the situation. Star S means the situation.
Yes.
T means task. What was the task that it should be done? And action, the job that you did, exactly your duty. And at the end is our result, that you should mostly show that the result was satisfaction, the customer was satisfied, and also your hiring manager, and you solved the problem and made the improvement. Am I right?
Exactly. 100% correct.
Yes. Okay. Now we can go for the next question. How do you evaluate non-verbal cues or body language?
I think it's a very good aspect to consider when you're interviewing for a company. Your body language, like a lot of nonverbal communication, is becomes critical in the interview process, because again, how you show up, your kind of demonstrates your behavior, demonstrates your attitude. We talked about earlier that we want to be confident but yet humble, right? It's totally understandable to be nervous. That can happen, right? But what you really want to try to do is practice enough before the interview, whether it's practicing on your own or practicing with friends and family or colleagues, where you're feeling at ease and comfortable and you're able to practice how you're communicating. So when you're communicating, you want to, just again, do so in a succinct way, calmly. If it helps, like I always keep a pen in my hand because I'm that type of person. I just like to have things, I can be fidgety at times, but it helps like calm my nerves to have maybe a pen in my hand or a notepad in front of me, where that way I can demonstrate my skills and experience in the best way possible.
Thank you. What is one thing you expect candidates to do before an interview?
Great question. So before the interview, you should definitely research the company. So when a job happens, well, actually, let me take a step back. When you apply for the job, my recommendation is always keep a copy of the job you applied for and save that. Because what can happen is you can apply for a job and you might not hear something for maybe upwards of a month before you get a response. And if that's the case and the company has taken down the job, well, now you're not really sure what you're trying to align your responses to. So always save a copy of the job description that you've applied to. Now, once you've done that, research the company. And what I typically do is, I'll go on their website, I'll check on the About Us section. Okay, are they a company that sells a product? Are they a company that does research? Are they a company, like, what is it that they do? And understand a little bit about that. Make some notes. The other part is, that you can do is when you type in the company into Google and just click on the news tab, you'll see maybe some recent headlines that the company just recently made, whether it's a new acquisition, whether it's a type of investment that they've done. Make note of that, highlighting that potentially in your interview.
Good point. I haven't heard up to now at this point.
Yeah, it's a great point, because
yeah.
What that tells me is that you've done your homework, you've come prepared. You'll be shocked to figure out how many individuals actually do not do, like, who don't research the company or showcase that in their interview. So I would definitely do that. Obviously, dress accordingly. Make sure you're dressing in a professional manner. Arrive I would say, like, I mean, I'm the type of person that doesn't like to be late for anything. So I typically arrive at least 15 minutes early. Sometimes I'll even get there a half hour early. And I can just go through my notes. I can go through my resume. I can calm my nerves if I need to, maybe just have some water or a coffee, whatever the case may be, and then arrive at the front desk at least 5-10 minutes early. During the interview, you've gone through all the preparation. You should be fully prepared and practiced and knowledgeable of everything that is to happen because you've built in all that research and you've built in all that time.
Yeah, exactly. And talking about the punctuality, it is very important. When you are not on time, it brings lots of stress for you. So this is very important. And it happened once for me because unfortunately I checked everything. It was going well, but unfortunately due to some accidents,
Yeah.
I arrived late and also it was raining. So you
Yeah.
should be very cautious about in this regard.
Yeah, and it's a good point because I mean it's happened. I mean, I've had candidates who got caught behind, say, a car accident or construction, and that's why I always advise leave earlier than you normally would. Like, I mean, if Google Maps is saying it takes 30 minutes, leave 45 minutes, even an hour if you need to.
Can you talk about during the interview?
So during the interview, what you want to do is, well, first of all, you want to greet all the individuals that might be in the room. It might be one, it might be more than one. You want to have your preparation in hand. Like, I always recommend having your notes in front of you, right? So I always keep, a notepad here. And when I'm having an interview, I'm going to have the questions I'm going to have prepared that I'm going to ask them. I'm going to have my notes about the areas that I may have researched about the company or about the news. So at any given point during the interview, I can look at my notes and it'll be fine. No, it's not. It's actually a very good look to have your notes in front of you versus not having it at all. So nothing to worry about there. Listen attentively, meaning you're actively listening to the questions that they ask. But even when they're asking, like when they're talking, you might be able to pick up on certain things that they're already giving you the answer, right? So you want to be able to understand, okay, well, based on how they're presenting this, it looks like they're looking for someone who's very detail oriented. I should highlight that example in my next question or some point in the interview. And then after the interview is completed, what I would always say is, again, thank them for their time. Be very courteous and appreciative of the time invested that they've made into you. I always recommend closing the interview. And what I mean by that is, you hear in sales where you always, you make the close, right? What this is basically a quick sentence to basically say, I want to thank you for your time, Akbar, for considering me for this role. I hope my skills and experiences have demonstrated satisfactory to you. Specifically, when you talked about, the need for someone who's very detail oriented, and I highlighted some of the examples I gave you during this conversation. And I hope to hear from you soon. And I thank you again for all the time that you've spent with me today. That's closing the interview.
Regarding closing the interview and I mean follow up,
Yep.
how long do you recommend? The same day or next day or 2 days, 1 week?
Like sending a follow-up thank you email.
Yes, follow up thank you letter.
It could happen as quickly as you getting to the car. It does, this could happen anytime. I would recommend doing it late, like, if you get home, it gives you that time to reflect on how everything went, right? I would say craft the email then and then send it. Even later that day, it doesn't matter. If the next day is not too bad, but beyond that is going to it doesn't look good. So I would say either the same day or the next day.
And I have a bitter story in this regard. I had an interview about maybe 5 or 6 years ago, and it was great interview, and I thought that it is working very well. But there were lots of applicants there
Yes.
so. And the lady told me that we will inform you maybe in 2 or 3 days, and it was in downtown. When I came down. I was looking for the bus station. I received a message. Thanks for your coming.
No.
And they didn't let me to send a thank you letter, follow up thank you letter. And it
Yeah.
was so embarrassing for me, really. I have never forgot this situation, and I think that it is not good. What do you think about
Yeah, no,
this?
listen, it happens. It's even happened to me. I remember I had that same experience where I had an interview and it seemingly didn't go well for them. And by the time I got to my car, I got the rejection notice. I'm like, okay, well, just didn't work out. But I wouldn't say be like, don't be disheartened by, any type of, if you don't get the success that you were hoping for. Like, I understand it could be disappointing, but understand it's going to take you 10, 15, 20, maybe even 100 attempts before you find that one successful part. So just keep doing the right things and keep grinding.
But I mean that if I receive that, for example, after 1 or 2 days later, okay, because there were lots of other applicants. But exactly when in maybe less than 5 minutes, I received the letter. It was so embarrassing. Okay,
Yeah,
how
I understand.
important is small talk and rapport building in interviews?
I wouldn't say it's critically important. I mean, you want to go with the flow of the conversation, right? So if I invite you in to the interview process and again, part of my job as the recruiter standing on the opposite side of that table is I want to make you feel as comfortable as possible, right? Because I want the best version of Akbar interviewing for this role that I have. So, I bring you into the room and we're getting set up. I might ask you like, so how's your day going? How was the drive? Was like everything will work out okay? And be engaged in that. Like, it was great. Like, no issues. I'm happy to be here. Things like that sort. Just go with the flow of the conversation.
Okay, not private questions. Okay. Do you mind if candidates bring notes, or you talked about it, or refer to their resume during the interview?
No, I don't mind. In fact, I encourage it, right? Because as I said, like having notes and referring to your notes or referring to your resume demonstrates the fact that you prepared for this interview and you're able to speak intelligently to the questions I'm asking. It does not hurt you at all. In fact, it actually helps you. So I always encourage bringing notes and bring additional copies of your resume with you in case they may not have.
Okay, for example, I go like this. For example, some people stick notes. I mean, virtual, not in
Mhm.
person. And
Yes.
you notice that okay, they are cheating a kind of from the notes on their laptop somewhere. What
Yeah,
about
no,
in this
no.
regard?
No, that is perfectly fine. Here's what I would say. Like, having notes on some of the areas that like I said, that you researched and things of that sort, that or areas of your resume that you want to highlight are perfectly fine. Even if you had them virtually on your screen and you're referring to them, that's perfectly fine. If you're reading them word for word, as if you're reading a script, then that's I would say definitely not. Because again, what they want to do is they want to understand the lived experience that you've had, and I can understand that through the conversation that you've had because I can tell whether or not you're reading off a script or you're just telling me from recalling from memory the lived experience that you've had. Because the lived experience is your experience, not the script. So I would not recommend doing that.
Exactly, like the professors or teachers
Exactly.
that they have their notes in the class and, as you mentioned,
Yes.
referring to them. How important English proficiency or accent in your evaluation?
Well, English proficiency, I would say, is likely important. Again, it all depends on the job. Accent is of no relevance. As an example, I mean, I grew up with my family immigrated from Italy to Canada, so I grew up with Italian parents who have a very thick accent even to this day, and individuals who I work with, all like there's half that are from Canada, half that are from host countries that have accents. The accent is of no relevance. How you communicate your English proficiency should matter, right? It doesn't have to be expert level, depending on the role, I would say. Like sometimes, again, if we're talking about senior level individuals who are looking to get in, and again, how critically important communication is. That might be a bigger factor, but I wouldn't be shy about the fact that someone has an accent.
Okay, thank you. How can candidates express confidence without seeming arrogant?
That's a good question. It's a very delicate balance, and I think it kind of showcases through just how your personality is structured, right? I mean, when I communicate the accomplishments I have in a conversation or an interview, I'm not trying to overdo it. I'm not trying to embellish it. I'm going to speak to it as part of the conversation. And I'm not going to do it in a way that is, I guess, boastful. And what I mean by that is, if you ask me, well, tell me about your HR experience, I'm just going to be it's a general question, so I'm going to be very succinct. I'm going to be like, I got 20 plus years of experience, more specifically in recruitment, organizational planning, and compensation, amongst various others. But if there's any areas of, specific areas that you want to uncover, we can talk. I'm more than happy to talk it through. But if you had asked me, tell me about your experience specifically in compensation, and then I start to inject other areas into the equation that have nothing to do with compensation, it seems like I'm trying to force more detail in there. Stick to the question, answer the question, give context where it's needed, and that's it. Arrogance can happen either through your behavior, like how you're holding yourself, like how you're presenting yourself, or it could happen through the information you're giving. Just as I said, be respectful, be humble, be confident in your accomplishments, and answer the questions that they ask you without over embellishing.
Great. Okay, moving next question. What role does a candidate's understanding of your company's mission, vision, and values play in the interview?
So I think it's a great question. I think it goes into the research that we recommended earlier, right? So when I'm looking at the organization that I'm applying for, and they tell me, okay, well, Michael, we have an interview set up for next week. That's my job now. I'm going to spend, whatever amount of time is to research that company. So we talked about what do they do, what have they done in the news, but I also want to research, what are the core values or the mission vision that they have for that company, because one, I want to be aligned to what they are looking for, right? But I also, like, as much as they're interviewing me for this job, I'm interviewing them to see if this is the job I want. Do I align with this company? Is this the right fit for me as well? And that's a very fair statement to make. So when I'm making my notes to understand what the company stands for and their core values, I'm putting those in my notes. And in the event, if a question comes up where I can integrate that and an example of that, of my experience aligns with those values, that's where the preparation and work really comes into play. And I think it's a very good, strong point to get in the habit of researching.
Okay. Another question is, can you briefly explain what each of these terms exactly mean from your point of view? Sometimes definitions are a little confusing. Mission,
Right.
vision. Can you very simply explain exactly what are they?
Absolutely. So very simply, the mission is, what does the company set out to do, right? If you go on any famous brand that you like, whether it's your favorite clothing line or your favorite sports team, whatever the case may be, if you go on the corporate website and you go into the About Us section, you're going to see their mission statement. It's really what they do. Vision is very closely related. Sometimes a company might just have a vision statement. They may not have a mission statement, but the vision is what they set out to do for now and into the future. And then the values are the core principles of how they conduct themselves as an organization. Every company pretty much has these, and every company has them uniquely to themselves. You would see a lot of similarities amongst different organizations, but that's really how they conduct themselves. So if you think about this really, really easily, a mission is what they do. A value is how they do it. That's really the critical difference.
Great, thanks for clarification. Can you describe a memorable interview, good or bad, and why it stood out?
Sure. So, I think as the interviewer or as the candidate?
Maybe both of them.
So, as an interviewer, as an individual representing the company, a good interview would be when I would say when I met with one of the members on my team as a candidate. I was there with another member of my team who was the hiring manager. I was the head for that company, and we were interviewing this individual, and this individual showed up like just full of personality. Like, and even though um, she wasn't trying to be expressive or anything, like you could tell she was very engaged. She was very happy to be in that conversation. She answered everything so incredibly well, but it was just always a very personable conversation, meaning it was very easy. It was fluid, right? Adversely, in that same interview process, so a different candidate that we interviewed was unfortunately like just a polar opposite to the examples I gave. When we started to ask a question, they would first jump in before the question was even asked. They would then be very they would be it was really odd. Like in some questions, they would be very long-winded, where it took up like a good 5 minutes of talking on one question, and in other questions, it would be like a one-word answer without answering our question. So you can see like it was very inconsistent. It got to a point where it was almost a little uncomfortable. So those were the areas where it stood out. And I mean, for me personally, I remember I had an interview once with, so I have a mentor who I've worked with a number of years ago, and to this day, I still maintain my communication with him, even years after he and I have stopped working together. But when he and I interviewed together, it was like meeting a best friend. It was very easy. It was a very casual conversation. We got granular at times on some of the experiences, but then we communicated on a lot of different areas just about in conversation. And it's a good example of what I mean by go where the conversation takes you. So don't be shy to get involved in the conversation if you feel it's comfortable. We did that, and we had such a great rapport that we ended up working together. And then again, years later, we're still friends. We still hang out. We still talk. I consider him a mentor in my space, where if I'm ever in a position where I'm not sure or I need a difference of opinion, I always seek him out. A bad example of when I interviewed, and this is an example of not necessarily I did something bad, necessarily anything bad, but when you see the HR kind of takes like a really weird turn. I had an interview once with an organization where the interviewer asked me if I was a vegetable. If I was a vegetable, sorry, I hit my cup. The vegetable, what vegetable would I be and why? And I
Oh
thought that
my
was a really
God, I
weird
have heard
question.
this kind of question in some of
Exactly. It
interviews.
has nothing to do with what we're talking about here. It was just a question that they thought would be fun and give them insight into my personality. I answered it, but I was like, this is very weird. So it's one of those things where, you got to go with the flow of the conversation, yes.
Mhm.
And sometimes in that interview, you realize this isn't the company you want to work for anyway.
That kind of question, I think that they went viral when some people said that, for example, Microsoft or Google, they ask this kind
Yeah.
of question to think about hiring, and at that time it went viral. Yes, I had the same experience. Okay,
Yeah.
thank you. What methods do you use to reduce bias in interviews?
Well, I mean, to be quite honest, there's like, the fact that I don't have a bias in how I assess interviews or assess resumes. So like we're talking about the interview specifically. We always have kind of a clarifying statement around understanding, okay, are there any accommodations that are required ahead of time for the interview process? And if so, please let us know and we'll make those accommodations. Aside from that, like I mean, like we talked about in the previous questions, if someone has an accent, it's irrelevant to the conversation. It's irrelevant to the experience, and it's irrelevant to my assessment. Whether that someone comes from Canada or whether that someone comes from a different country is irrelevant to me. What we're going to be talking about is specifically on their depth of experience. So sticking to that specific or those specifics is the one and bona fide way you can eliminate that opportunity for a preconceived bias or a confirmation bias. What I'm looking for is, again, I'm going to have multiple candidates who I'm interviewing with over the course of a couple of days, and I'm going to make my notes on how they showed up, how they communicated, the type of experience that they've had, and were they able to seemingly have a good fit within an organization based on their behavior. Those are the areas.
Okay, thank you. How do you view candidates who show a willingness to learn or pursue education independently?
I think it's always a fantastic thing. We talked about the flexibility and adaptability earlier, but I think learning the willingness and the desire to want to learn and improve is a very valuable attribute to have. Because as we said, the market is evolving, technology evolves, and how those impact what we do and how we do it in our day-to-day jobs is going to play a big factor. It may not seem relevant today, but in 5 years from now, it could be very dramatic. So your ability to want to improve is a great valued skill that any employer would want to see in any individual that they have working with their company.
I mean that is it a positive point or sometimes
Very.
can be negative because you want them to work, not, for example, get involved in the continuing education, something like this.
I would not see that as a negative whatsoever. What I would see is, if I have individuals that are willing and having desire to improve themselves through independent study, what that tells me is that, okay, there could be a possibility where this individual can grow within this company over many, many years. Like you don't want to learn what you want to do like after 10 years of working the same job and say, okay, I'm ready for the next job. I haven't learned what I need to do to perform it well. You want to learn before that. And sometimes that could require study. So no, it would never be looked upon, at least but not by me or the companies I've worked with, as a negative.
Thank you. How do you differentiate between someone who is well prepared and someone just rehearsed? We talked about it earlier, but we can talk more in this regard again.
Well, I mean, someone who's well prepared is like, okay, so let's maybe differentiate between the two, right? Someone who's rehearsed is someone we talked about the script earlier, who's memorized how to answer a question and things of that sort. But what if I throw them a curveball in something that they haven't rehearsed and they haven't prepared for? Well, that's where the well prepared individual comes into play. Someone who is well prepared not only has practiced how they can showcase their skills and experience. And what I mean by that is not rehearsing a script, but saying, okay, I know what I've done and I'm able to communicate this effectively because I've practiced this numerous times and I know how it can apply to certain questions. But I've researched the job, I've researched the job description, I've researched the organization. That individual, it will be very hard for me to throw them a curveball because no matter what I throw them, what question I ask them that it relates to the job but maybe they haven't prepared for, chances are they're going to be able to answer that question pretty well because they've done the work. Practicing a script is not enough. I would say, you approach this like you would approach any important aspect of your life, and that's through preparation, research, and practice.
Okay. What types of questions do you ask during a phone screening to get an initial sense of whether a candidate might be a good fit or not?
Sure. So first of all, I mean, when I do my phone screens usually are about 15 to 30 minutes. Like they're pretty short. And I tell them that at the beginning, like, this is just a basic conversation just to get to know them and to have just to understand the basic qualifications of experience with them. And the reason I really highlight and make specific
purpose to mention it's a basic casual conversation is I want to take the pressure off. I don't want them to think this is a formal interview because I just want to have this conversation. So the only formalities I will get into in that conversation is really, okay, if you were successful, how much, when can you start? So are you currently working with an organization that you require to give them notice? Are you available at any time? Like, are you in between jobs at the moment and you can start immediately? So those type of questions. Are you legally eligible to apply for this job? Meaning, it doesn't have to be a Canadian citizen, but are you legally eligible to work in Canada? Because that's a qualifying question. And then lastly, like from a compensation standpoint, are we aligned? So what is the expected compensation you're looking for this type of role? And the reason I ask this is to make sure that you and I are aligned. Because if I say, hey, listen, the role is somewhere between 70 to 80,000, and you're telling me, well, I'm looking for 150, well, we know that we're not aligned, right? And I would hate for us to go through, not ask that question, and then go through 2, 3, 4 interviews before we get to that point, and then now we've wasted our time. But going through the phone screen beyond that is just saying, okay, so tell me about your experience as it relates, to these specific areas. And it's just, again, a casual conversation. That's the most of it, because that's going to give me the initial information I need to say, okay, are they able to communicate well? Did they communicate their experience to me well in a sense where I have a good understanding of what they've done? And if so, I'm bringing them into the more formal round of interviews.
Okay. In my own regard, I have two phone screening that I remember, unfortunately, didn't go very well. And the problematic part was the first question asked was related to my education, because I have lots of experience doing the community service as a social worker in this regard, but I don't have exactly the same certificate. She didn't wait for my explanation and also going through my experience. The first question asked, do you have social worker degree? I said no, but somehow it is related, and I'm so sorry if we couldn't find anyone, we can contact you. Maybe less than 2 minutes.
Yeah, that's unfortunate, because I mean, I feel like there can be individuals who would interview like that, and maybe they have their reasons, but I think that's a disservice to finding out really whether or not someone has the qualifications that they require. Because as I mentioned earlier, if you have the right depth of experience, I don't care what piece of paper you may have gotten 15 years ago from the education piece. Like, don't get me wrong, I do think it's important, but it's not to say that you can't be successful without that particular diploma or degree. In certain cases, it's a must. I totally get it, because I mean, you don't want to go and see your doctor knowing the fact they never went to med school. That's an example where it's absolutely important. You don't want to be a lawyer without a law degree. But in certain cases, there's individuals who can be very successful.
Most of them, for example, if you check the great people like Bill Gates, lots of the organization, they are successful and they don't have even degree. Anyway,
there's many individuals like that. I agree. And like I said, it's unfortunate that you had that experience, and it seemed like that conversation probably and should have gone longer, just so that way you can really showcase that experience. It's unfortunate that it didn't, but I understand that can happen. And it's not a great look.
Okay, thank you. What's the good question a candidate should ask you in the interview?
Great question. So I think there's a couple of questions I would always, if it was me and sitting in that chair as a candidate, that I always ask. So one is, if they haven't already explained, or if these are already unanswered, but the one question I ask is this a newly created role, or is this a role to replace the previous individual? And really what that will tell, like, either way, that's going to give you good information. Because if it's a newly created role, what that tells me now is, okay, so my follow-up to that would be then, okay, so based on the fact that it's a newly created role, what are you really looking to get? Like, what are you looking to see in this role as far as results in the next, say, 1 to 3 years? Because they're building it for a reason. and you want to get that information out. If it's a replacement, well, what, did the person leave or that person get promoted? Like, I wouldn't be asking those questions, but usually sometimes they'll offer that up. But what I would follow up if they say, well, this is a replacement for an individual, I'd be like, great. Okay, so what do you feel are the right requirements of skills and competencies that would make this role a success if I was successful in attaining this role? And you can ask those questions. I would avoid anything like internal policies, asking too much information around like what's in it for you. Like, can you tell me more about the benefits? That's not a good question. Can you tell me more about like, I get a lot of questions oftentimes like, can you tell me what the day-to-day would look like in this company? That's an impossible question for me to answer because every day is different, right? So I would stick to aspects that, what is the company looking to accomplish out of this role? How would this role integrate within the different divisions within the organization? Things like that. Like showcase that you're looking to get perspective on a bigger scale beyond just you in this role, but really how you can contribute to the success of that company and for that role.
Actually, to add your points regarding avoiding questions, I think that we should avoid the question that we can find the information in the job description or their website. It is very important.
Yep, it's a very good point.
Yeah. What signs indicate that a candidate might not thrive under pressure or in a team?
Well, I think the more immediate question or the immediate sign, I should say, is if they are unable to kind of calm themselves in the interview process, chances are it's not going to give me a good sense of confidence that you're going to thrive under pressure in the job itself, right? When I'm interviewing somebody and they're unable to kind of get their thoughts clear, communicate with clarity, be calm and be confident in how they communicate. I'm looking for that as confidence as indicators as to how they're going to perform in the job itself. Because in the job, there could be maybe there's customers who are going to be very harsh to you. Maybe there is areas that you're working with individuals, colleagues, or even processes that can become very tough and challenging. I need to see indicators in that conversation that really show me that you can work under pressure. So I think it's how you communicate, and the examples that you can give me that showcase team collaboration and support and critical thinking that are going to give me those confidence indicators that you're going to be just fine should anything happen in the job itself.
Okay, thank you. How do you assess a candidate's self-awareness or humility?
I think it really just comes as part of a behavioral, like for lack of a better term, behavioral assessment and how you communicate, right? Your body language, your posture, how you're communicating, the level of detail in which you're communicating. You're not showcasing emotion, but more matter-of-fact results and confidence in your lived experience and what you're communicating. You're not the examples that you're providing aren't showing that, where you were showing a competitive nature against your peers or your colleagues, but rather that of support and collaboration. So I think that's where you really want to understand someone's level, or that's where you get to understand someone's level of humility.
Can body language or appearance ever unfairly impact an interview?
I don't know if it's unfairly. So body language is really your representation of yourself, right? I mean, I don't know. What you want to make sure is that you want to have, good, just presenteeism. So that means like, you don't have to have the best posture. You don't have to, and it's okay to look away to kind of get the words right in your head. And yes, you want to maintain eye contact as much as possible, but you want to be able to demonstrate respect and appreciation for for the conversation and flow with it. What you don't want to do is have these moments where you're showcasing that you're just not interested, whether you're scoffing at the question or making those type of gestures, whether you're doing like really over the top hand motions or anything like that. Like, you just want to be calm. You want to have a conversation just like you're having with a friend or a colleague. Remember, this is a professional environment, right? Like, you're not in the door yet. You haven't built those rapport aspects yet. So don't get overly friendly, but just go with the conversation, but be respectful.
Okay. For example, I can ask this question. Some people have unintentional habits. You see that everything is going very well, the resume is perfect, everything, but in the interview, for example, the person is picking his nose sometimes. Okay, what will happen really?
Well, I would say, it may or may not impact the interview, but it would be an area that we would probably, maybe have some pause on. Like a common like body language aspect that could happen and has happened is when someone gets really nervous, they start sweating, right? That is perfect. That has happened numerous times, right? It's even, and I'm even prone to it when I get nervous too. So what I typically do is understanding that is like I'll pause and say, you want to take a minute, you want some water, and maybe get them like some napkins just to show them like, listen, I'm supporting you in this. Don't don't worry, take a breath, calm down. Things like, like you said, picking your nose, like that's more of a sociable aspect that you typically do not want to do, right? Like I said, you want to be respectful and professional.
Yeah, I know, but I mean that if everything is perfect, does it
Yes.
affect impact on the result or not?
Hard to say. It's never happened. So I don't know if it would impact it. I would like, it would probably get brought up in the conversation, like, where if I'm with the hiring manager and say, Michael was great, but like, why was he picking his nose? I'm like,
Yes.
I don't know. Maybe we need to get another
So
conversation. What
it
happens?
shows that we should be very careful. Yeah, exactly.
Absolutely.
So,
Absolutely.
okay. What do you think of virtual interviews versus in person? Do you assess differently?
No, I don't assess them differently. Virtual interviews, I think since the pandemic have become more frequent, and just part of the norm now. I personally, like, I prefer in-person interviews, and where I would now inject virtual interviews is one of two scenarios. One is, so when I talked about the phone screen earlier, well, those are always now like a short video call, which is like 15 minutes, because you really want to try to build in that personable face-to-face as much as possible. And for most companies, the phone interview has kind of gone away and it's no longer just a phone conversation, but it's now a quick phone/video conversation. The other scenario is if we're dealing with different geographical locations, right? Like I have, like, in companies I hire for, I'm not just hiring for the head office, I'm hiring for all the regions. So if I'm hiring someone who lives in British Columbia or in Saskatchewan, well, I'm not going to fly them in for it's an interview or for me to fly them out. We're just going to have a quick video call. But in-person interviews is where you really makes up the biggest bulk of behavioral and formal interview assessments, because it's a good opportunity to really kind of get a personable understanding of their body language and how they interact with other people.
If you yourself are going to participate in an interview, which one do you prefer, in person or virtual?
I prefer in person.
Why?
Well, for the reasons I said, right? I want to get a good kind of personable assessment, because like I said, regardless if I'm the interviewer or the candidate, I want to have that personable rapport and interaction. I want to gauge their body language as the interviewer to assess, okay, is this the right company? Is this reflection of the right company for me? How they interact with me matters. So I want to be able to understand, is this the right company for me? And I'm only going to be able to really do that through a very kind of in the same room type of conversation. Over the internet, through a virtual interview, you can still get that personal relationship, but it's a little bit tougher. It's a little bit different.
Exactly.
So that's why I prefer in person.
Exactly, the same for me. What general advice and recommendation would you give candidates to help them succeed in an interview?
Sure. So, I mean, I think we touched on a lot of them
Yeah,
already. So,
exactly.
I mean, I wouldn't go, I don't want to repeat all the ones. I mean, obviously, go back in the video and make notes of all the things we said. Those are definitely going to help you succeed. I think when you're demonstrating your general kind of respect and appreciation through the way you're answering questions, through your active listening, and through just your ability to maintain that rapport and go with the flow of the conversation, but contribute to it as well, is going to be it's going to help you stand out. Because when they see you as an individual that they can have a conversation with, they're also envisioning that others in the organization can easily get along with Akbar or with Michael, that they can be a good fit within this organization. That's what you really want to get out.
Thank you. Altogether, from a hiring manager's perspective, what are the biggest red flags in a resume, cover letter, and interview separately? Very quickly, because we talked all of them
Yeah,
now.
we did talk about these. So very quickly, spelling errors, grammatical errors, script-based cover letter, like you want to avoid these type of things. In the interview process, you want to be calm, be confident, be humble, be contextual in how you answer your questions, and just go with the flow of the conversation. Contribute to it as well.
All of them you mentioned red flags, but about interview you mentioned
Oh, sorry, the biggest red,
yes.
red flags I didn't mention on the interview. The red flags, I think if you're not answering the question that they ask, this actually happens quite often, where I would ask you, Akbar, tell me about a time when you had to face conflicting priorities, and you start giving me an example that has nothing to do with it. That's a red flag to me, because it tells me you're not actively listening to to the question, and that you may or may not even have an example to give me. I might have to ask it again. But if you're not actively listening, that's a big red flag.
And what about interrupting you?
Interrupting me, I'm not as
Because some
I'm not
people
as
I have
offended.
seen, they are very sensitive in this regard.
I'm not as offended by that,
Mhm.
because when we're talking about a long conversation, right? Like we're not talking about a very transactional conversation. We're talking about a give and take conversation. So it's very common where you might step on the other person's like last couple of words. I would say try to avoid it as much as possible. But if it happens once or twice, it's not that big a deal. Even acknowledge it, like, oh, I apologize. I thought you were, I sorry for stepping on your question. That's perfectly fine. In a conversation, it does happen.
For example, the interviewer is going to ask a question, start asking, and the interview think that okay, he has got the point and interrupt it without letting the interviewer finish. Okay, what is the next step? Something like I mean this kind of. Then interviewer says that, but I didn't mean this. I wanted to continue.
Right, right.
And
Yeah, no, that's a good point. Like, so, you always want to like let them finish by, of course. Sometimes what can happen is the interviewer might take a pause, and thinking that they're done their question, you might jump in. That's perfectly understandable. And I'm sure if that happens, you can step back and say, I'm sorry, can you please finish your thought, or please finish your question. But if you are overly excited and think you already have the answer, just again, this comes down to the keep calm, just wait, be patient, let them finish.
okay, if somebody is like me, very talkative,
Mhm.
is there any point that you can tell us when we can understand we should stop?
Um, I think you want to be like you want to try to acknowledge, and this is what I mean by go with the flow of the conversation. Like you want to try to acknowledge through assessing their body language, like am I going on in too much detail? And you can start to figure this out if they start to kind of shift their eyes, or their body language becomes like slumped a little bit. I would say stick to the details of your experience, And if you feel it's not enough detail, you can even ask, say, I'm more than happy to elaborate if you want additional detail, and leave and let them answer you. Like you say, yeah, please go on. Okay, great. And now I can continue. If not, then you've made your point and you can move on to the next.
And what about the time management? Do we have any specific time, for example, 2 minutes, 1 minute, 3 minutes, 5 minutes, that we can stop talking or not?
No, I don't think so. I think because I mean it depends on the nature of the question, because some questions can be very easy to answer in 15 seconds. Other questions might require a lengthier period of time. I think you don't want to go on for multiple minutes. I don't think there's a single question where you need to spend 5 minutes answering. I think you can pretty much summarize most within a minute to a minute and a half.
Okay, thank you. And next part is about post-interview hiring decision, behind the scene. How many people are usually involved in reviewing an application?
Oh, good question. So on average, I would say about 3 to 5 would be involved in assessing your resume. So when a resume comes into the applicant system, you usually have a recruiter that's assigned to the hiring for that role. That recruiter is then going to review it, and if they like that resume, they're going to send it to the hiring manager. That hiring manager may be the direct person who that role reports to, and they might then send it to their specific manager, say, I'm considering Michael for this role. What do you think? This is the profile. It might even come to me as the head of HR to be involved in that interview process if there's more than one step. So it could go as many as maybe 5, 6, 7 people. So there are usually multiple people involved in reviewing your application.
Okay. What's the role of HR versus the hiring manager in final decision?
It's a good question, and I think it could depend on what the structure of that process looks like. So what I always try to do is understand or help my hiring manager understand really what they're looking for. They might have a good understanding of what they're looking for, but sometimes it requires some encouragement and some context or some objectivity that could be injected into that conversation or into that assessment. So my role isn't to make the decisions for the hiring manager, because HR is not responsible for their business unit. The hiring manager is responsible for their team. So they're going to make that final decision. My job is to encourage them on what would be to get alignment on what the best hiring decision could be. So if I feel that the hiring manager is over prioritizing certain skills other than the fit or that type of skills, and I think they might need some encouragement, I will have that conversation with them. And despite if they agree to it or not, at the end of the day, they have that decision.
Okay. And the next question is the same. Who is usually the key decision maker, and how do they collaborate during the hiring process?
The key decision makers are usually the hiring manager and maybe even their boss. Like HR is usually one of those individuals as well. But the point is, it's usually a collaborative effort. I've never really seen one person make the decision for everything. It's usually myself as the HR representative, the hiring manager, and maybe their manager, or depending on the role, could even be a CEO who might get involved. So it's usually a collaborative effort on that side.
Okay. Are internal candidates treated differently than external ones?
Absolutely. So the reason being is that when we have a role that's posted, internal candidates are usually going to be the first individuals that we will look to as an organization to fill in the gap or to be successful in going to that role. Because really what you want to do as an organization is you want to build your internal opportunities for people so that way they can grow and progress and build experience, and that's how you create career longevity. Now, let's say I have an open role for a recruiter on my team. right? The recruiter on my team is like kind of a mid-level position, meaning that there's an analyst that exists underneath, and then there's maybe senior recruiter roles that exist above that role. Well, if I have an open role, the first people I'm going to be looking to are my analysts to say, okay, are they ready for that next step? And if so, I'm going to interview them and I'm going to assess them and I'm going to consider them for that role, which means that if they get to that recruiter role, well, now I have to fill in the analyst role, and that's where I'll go external because there's no one internal that can fill that job. So that would be where it would be treated somewhat differently.
Okay, yeah. Do referrals carry extra weight?
I think they do. Yeah, I think so. Because there's the belief that good talent knows good talent, right? So if you're in an organization and you bring forward a referral and they look to you as like, well, listen, Akbar has been fantastic for us. Like, if he's referring this person, this could be really something to really look into. They'll typically get a little bit more attention in the resume review than they would if they just got through just the normal application process. Now, it doesn't guarantee them anything. It doesn't guarantee them an interview. It doesn't guarantee them the job, but it does usually give them a little bit more immediate eyes on the resume or consideration of the candidacy.
Okay, what about favoritism here?
No, I don't think favoritism is like, I'm not saying it doesn't exist. I'm sure there are examples where that can happen. Referrals are different from favoritism, right? Because if we're talking about favoritism, we're talking about that would be the equivalent of me being the hiring manager saying, hey, I have this referral that I want to bring in, right? Versus you reporting to me and saying, I have this referral that I want to bring in. That would be the difference in favoritism. I think, at the end of the day, if someone's being brought in as a referral, they're still going to have to go through the same assessments and just like anybody else. They're not going to bypass the interview process or bypass the qualifications required for the role. So you would hope that doesn't happen. If it does happen, well, then you might have your answer of favoritism then, but usually any referral has to go through those same checkpoints.
Okay. Actually, I wanted to mention that, Michael, really, I think that there were lots of good points, even for hiring managers, if they really watched this video. Thank you so much.
I hope so.
I enjoyed the conversation. Thank you. How do you make your final hiring decision between two equally strong candidates?
Yeah, so it's always a tough question. So whenever this scenario is positioned, there's no such thing as two equally strong candidates because obviously they're both individuals and they might bring value in similar ways, but not equal, because one might have a different depth of experience, one might have a different way of communicating or showcasing different values or competencies that we think that might be successful towards the job. And ultimately it comes down to, like I said, it's usually a group decision, and we'll sit there and we'll identify, okay, candidate A, candidate B, how do you think that they would what do we see as the values? What do we see as the potential pitfalls? And we'll there's a lot of conversation that goes into that. But there is no two equally strong. So it's almost an impossible question to answer. But when it comes down to it, more often than not, the individual that has the better fit within the organization would likely get the nod for the successful candidate. And the reason for that is the tactical side of things. For the most part, I can teach anyone as a hiring manager but I can't teach fit. I can't teach critical thinking as easily. I can't teach collaboration as easily. I can't teach the kind of the ethical kind of structure you have as an individual. Like these are all like your attention to detail, those competencies are usually what's going to make you more successful than your competition.
Exactly. What role does the feedback from team members play in the decision-making process?
This is a very good question, and I would say highly, highly up there on the decision-making process. So, as an example, when I was hiring for members of my team, what I would do is I would go through the various steps of the interview process of interviewing candidates. And for the last, say, the top 2 or 3 candidates, I would say, as the final step, you're going to be interviewing, you're going to be meeting with my team. I'm removing myself out of the equation. I want my team to interview these individuals because these are the people that they're going to be working with. So this equation actually solves, or this process solves two key aspects. One is the candidate will meet with the people that they are interviewing with, and they can even ask them, "Hey, how is Michael as a leader? How they can get an assessment of whether or not they want this job." Secondly, my team members will make that assessment of like, okay, we do think that candidate A or candidate C might be the best fit in how into our team. So all that peer information is very, very critical. And that's why you'll oftentimes see it maybe in the final step in the process where you might have a panel interview. And if you have a panel interview, that's where you get like the collaboration of assessment.
Yeah, I myself have experience of panel interview too.
Mhm.
What are common reasons a candidate doesn't get the offer even after a good interview?
Well, I mean, I think we've alluded to a lot of those reasons. Like, again, it could come down to fit, right? I mean, there are very much opportunities that can happen where I have 2 fantastic candidates, and either one can be incredibly successful and get it, but I have to make a decision on one, right? So it could be the fact that, like, listen, it was a incredibly tough decision, but if and you didn't get the nod on this decision, but if there's anything else that comes up, I'm going to immediately call you. That can happen, and that has happened. And other things can be just like, again, does the team feel that there is a better alignment with one individual versus the other? Like those are some common reasons that can happen. I wouldn't say salary would play too much of a factor because as I mentioned, we usually get that ironed out early on in the process. I mean, if someone's asking for like 150 versus 155, that's not going to really make much of a difference to me. It's a matter of what it comes down to is who's going to be the most successful person that I can get into this role.
Exactly. Thank you. How important is it for candidates to follow up after the interview, and how should they do it?
Yeah, so I think it is important because it shows your interest and it shows your enthusiasm and shows your appreciation and respect for them in taking the time to interview you. So once I would say they do it as we talked about, like the day of or the next day, and it's a very simple email where it's like, thanks again for taking the time to meet with me. After reflecting on the interview and hearing what you were looking for in this role, I feel like my skills and experiences would align very well. And should you require anything further from me, please feel free to reach out. I anxiously look forward to hearing back from you in the short term.
Okay.
That's as simple as it can be.
Another question here. What about re-follow up and 3 follow up and 4 follow up letters? I mean that
No,
you send
yeah,
you
that's
send
a good question.
you send letter, you don't receive any answer. Then you follow up again. Okay, what happened after next week? What is your idea in this regard? If you send letter and you don't receive any letters.
Well, I mean, you may not, so that there's an unfortunate part where that maybe some recruiters and interview or HR professionals do is they don't close the loop on certain candidate conversations, which is unfortunate, and it does happen. But I wouldn't recommend sending multiple follow-ups. So if you send a follow-up, you can assume that they received it, leave it at that. Usually the HR person will
Actually, my question is here. We can continue here.
Sure.
How transparent is your feedback process? Do you offer advice to unsuccessful candidates? And if you see the only question that I have put emoji, it is here. Why do you think most organizations, the thing that you were mentioning, don't provide feedback or even respond to rejected applicants? Really, it is rare that they don't
Yeah, it is
answer.
rare.
Yes. Okay.
You're
Now
right.
we can continue completely here.
Yeah, so I think there's a couple of aspects to this, right? So one is there might be like it might be an avoidance to the uncomfortable conversation. But the other factor to consider is that it's a time factor as well. Now, I will say this. As I mentioned, if I post a job and I get 200 applicants, I can't send a rejection notice that's personalized to every single one of them for 200 people. What I can do is, for the people that I end up speaking to, whether it's the video conversation or whether it's the formal interview process, if I don't feel that they're going to be successful, I will send them the rejection notice. But in that notice, I always offer up, say, hey, listen, we were going with with candidates that are more aligned to our expectations. Should you require any specific feedback, I'm more than happy to give that to you. Because that's a conversation I can handle in regards to the amount of conversations. And sometimes they've taken me up on it. Sometimes people have asked, like, oh yeah, I would love to understand more, and I will be very transparent with them. I wouldn't expect that from every single person. I know that there are some people who just do not do it. And it's unfortunate, but you can't force the issue either. You can always just ask, if you receive a rejection notice, you can say, thank you very much for your time. I appreciate the opportunity. Should you have any feedback that can help me in my search, I would greatly appreciate it, and just leave it at that. You might get a response, you might not get a response.
I noticed that time management, especially, it is important. For example, answering 200 or 500
Right.
or more. But I, as an applicant, I have respected your company, your organization, and I applied your job. At least I need this respect. Very even an automatic letter and said, okay, sorry, thanks for your application. Bye. It is enough for me because I know that okay, I shouldn't expect more, and I can continue my job searching and applying other place. This is my point. That at
Yep.
least this they deserve it to receive very short letters. Hi,
Yes.
bye. Really, it is very important. What do you think in this regard?
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, I think there's it's basically what we're calling the candidate experience, very similar to a customer experience, right? When you are going through the efforts of applying and interviewing, you want to be able to feel like you are being taken seriously, that your time is also equally respected. And there are some companies that do it exceptionally well, and there's companies that are still developing what that can look like. And I think, it's perfectly understandable to not feel appreciated if you just get ghosted by an employer. And really the takeaway from that is, if it was me on the receiving end, is like, okay, well, this is clearly not the company that I would want to work for anyway. So I take that for what it is and I move on to the next opportunity.
Thank you. Thanks for elaboration more. How can candidates handle constructive feedback or rejection professionally?
Well, I think that's a good point. So I think, if you're going to ask for the feedback, be prepared to hear the feedback. So just like anything else, like whether it's, asking for feedback or receiving feedback from your friends, your family, your spouse, you want to be able to take that feedback with objectivity, understanding where they're coming from and how they would have, how it can be improved. If you were to take the feedback saying, no, like I actually meant this, or you start becoming defensive, it's not, you're not satisfying the ask or the requirement of getting that feedback. The feedback that you're getting is going to be constructive. It may hurt your feelings, it may hurt your ego, but you have to be able to take that like understand and take that back and say, okay, well, what can I now do with this feedback to help improve it in the future? It's never it's obviously not going to be all positive. So you got to be able to take that with just put the ego aside, put the hurt feelings aside, take it and understand where where it can be improved.
Exactly. And honestly, if I'm telling that if I consider myself somehow a successful teacher, because my main experience was regarding teaching, it was the feedback that I have got from my students and also my colleagues. Really,
Yes.
they helped me to improve and it worked very well. What is your approach to handling salary expectation and negotiation?
Good question. So,
And hard question.
yeah, very hard question. So, you want to be pretty balanced and realistic when you're talking about salary expectations and negotiations, right? So we talked about the fact that talking about what those salary expectations would look like at the beginning of the interview process and are they aligned, right? So as a recruiter, where I get frustrated is if I validate, hey, listen, the role is between 70 and 80,000. You're like, yep, that range is perfectly great with me. If we get to the offer phase and you're saying, well, actually, now that I'm considering it, I think I want 90,000. That is incredibly frustrating because you've already, like, I validated you at the beginning, when we originally spoke, you agreed. And to now deviate away from that is almost like, did I just waste my time in going through all this process? Because I already established what that range was. So what I would suggest is be honest about what your expectations are. And in the event, because if the role is being budgeted for a reason, so they're not going to just change it later on. So the reason I'm making mention of this is if I'm a candidate and I'm just agreeing to whatever they say at the beginning, just so I can go through the process and hopefully negotiate a better salary later on, that is not going to happen. Now, it could happen within reason, though. What I mean by that is if I say the range is between 70 to 80, and then you come to me and say, well, I want to bring you on. I want to offer you 72,000. Be like, okay, so when you receive the offer, be appreciative and say, can I review the offer and come back to you, the next day? Take a look at it, review, be honest. Is this suitable for you? Like, are you satisfied with the offer? If the answer is yes, take the offer, right? If the answer is no, because you feel like you can deserve more higher on the range, and for the reality that you feel like you bring more value to the table, whether it's seniority, long tenure, etc., then you can respectfully bring it up. Say, and how I would typically do that is to say, listen, Akbar, first of all, thank you very much for the offer. I'm really excited for the opportunity, and I think this could be fantastic. A lot of the terms in the offer look really great, and I'm very pleased with them. I'm wondering if we can just quickly talk about salary. I understand you at the beginning you said the role was around between 70 to 80, so being lower on the scale, I can appreciate that, but I'm wondering if we can raise that up to say 75. I feel like I bring 10 plus years of experience. And I think I can be a very strong value to the organization. And I'm just wondering if this is appeasable to you. And I'd love to hear your feedback. That's like how I would go about it. So you can see that I'm showing my appreciation, I'm showing my excitement, and I'm showing my negotiation within reason of the budget that they offer and within a reality of like, it's just a few $1,000s. It's not tens of thousands of dollars. So that's how I would go about about the conversation of negotiation. The worst that they can say is no. And again, is it really going to make a big difference to you if it's $3,000 less? Maybe not.
Okay, good points. But considering yourself as a applicant that wants to avoid, what kind of strategy they can use?
Well, I mean, I would recommend the fact that like if this is an area that you feel is important to you, like then we got to figure out a way how we can get you comfortable to have that conversation. So whether that's you reach out to people in your network, your friends, your family is ask these questions as to how, or maybe just viewing this video, how you can go about it. I think what you want to avoid is communicating in a way that makes you seem unappreciative or not excited. So you want to be able to do both. Like, you don't want to come across too aggressive. You don't want to come across as almost like insulted that you got such a low offer, like, because that's where the arrogance comes into play that we talked about earlier. So you want to show like, hey, listen, I really appreciate the offer. I'm super excited. I'm just wondering if we can have this conversation around improving the salary a little bit, because I feel like I can bring this value based on this experience. You're doing it with humility and respect and a little bit of aggression, but not over the top.
Okay, thank you. What makes a candidate memorable after the interview process?
I think just like how they showed up in the interview. Did they close the interview, as I mentioned earlier? Like, did they give me their kind of their summary at the very end? And did they send a thank you? Like, those are all great things that can help improve your chances. They don't guarantee anything, obviously, but anything that helps.
Okay. And the last part, additional insights and guidance. It is a kind of wrap up. And next question, how should a newcomer or recent graduate handle a lack of Canadian experience?
Sure, and it's a good question. I think it's two different aspects, right? So if you're a recent grad, the first thing you need to do is start, applying everywhere you can for jobs that are realistic to entry level roles to kind of build yourself into the company, and be, I guess, realistic in those expectations, because you're going to have to work your way up. For someone who has a lack of Canadian experience, so someone who's new to the country and coming into the Canadian market, the first thing we need to do is, you start to kind of understand what is it you want to establish as far as where you like, what is it that you currently have? Like, what are the type of experiences you have? What is it the type of role that you're looking for? And is there a disconnect between the specifics of what the employer is looking for and what you have at the moment? And if so, how can you build that? Well, we talked a little bit about that earlier, right? We talked about volunteer experience. We talked about accreditation. We talked about validation, things of that sort. And there's a number of different ways to go about it. And it's hard for me to really give you specifics because it really depends on the role itself. But start to ask those questions. Start to reach out to people that might be able to give you guidance, maybe even watching this video, doing some research, things like that. So there's a lot of different ways that individuals can start to build themselves up in preparation for the upcoming opportunities they're going to be applying for.
Exactly. Good points. Thank you. What advice would you give to someone who gets interviews but no offers?
Well, I think like I said, like it's going to take 100 opportunities before you get that one offer, right? So don't be discouraged. We talked about asking for feedback if you're in that final step, but you're just not the successful candidate, and just say, do you mind me asking if is there any feedback that you can provide that helped prompt your decision? And you might be able to get some feedback. And again, it might be like it was a really tough call. It could have gone either way, but just don't get frustrated. Don't get discouraged. I know it's easier said than done. I've been on that side too, where you're really excited, but you're not successful. Just keep doing the right things and keep going through that process.
I mean that, maybe you apply a lot, don't receive any interview. It is not important. I mean that you get lots of interviews. It shows that your resume, everything is good. So
Yeah.
what can be the problem?
Yeah, I think you're right. It shows that your resume, that part of the equation being your resume is good. Like, so don't change, what's not broken there. It could be how you're interviewing, right? And like I said, it could be it could just be the feedback that you're trying to request is like, can I do something better, right? Oftentimes, like you'd be surprised how people will offer up that feedback in that process, and I would say take that with the spirit in which it's given, and see how you can adapt it, and what made you successful in getting your resume completed. just like the interview, it's a work in progress, and the more feedback that you can get, the more you can improve, the more you can fine tune it, and then you inevitably will be successful.
And my recommendation is that having mock interviews, lots of community centers, they have free employment services. They can refer
Absolutely.
them and have a mock interview. It will help maybe. Okay, what do you wish more applicants understand about hiring process?
Ooh, this is a good question.
Yeah.
I don't know if I understand if there's anything I wish that they understood. Like, I mean, I think what I understand, from having conversations with people who are frustrated with the hiring process, is, they will oftentimes make assumptions in regards to what prompted them either not getting selected or not getting the attention, right? Understand, it's a highly competitive market. It's a very, very competitive market. So with that being said, like, you want to be as undeniable as possible, meaning that you're doing all those things that we had talked about through this podcast. It's, getting your resume done in a way that is it's bulletproof. It looks perfect. It gets the attention. In the interview, you've done the preparation. You've gone through that process of being, like, not only prepared to understand what the company is, but prepared to answer all the questions in a way that the employers really want to understand, to get to know you best. And going through the kind of like the behavioral preparation, like how you should present yourself, how you should communicate. So understand that even despite all those best efforts, sometimes you may not be the best person. Sometimes there might be someone who outcompetes you, but it should not be discouraging, in the sense that you got to keep going through that process. It's just it's the spirit of competition. Sometimes, like, it's just not your day, but tomorrow could be. So,
Exactly. Yeah. How can candidates best show their commitment to the role and organization?
so I think when it comes down to it, when you're being interviewed, you really want to showcase the value you can contribute to that organization and to that role. And that's how you communicate in your answers, right? It's how you showcase that in the closing statement that you do at the interview process. You can reiterate that in the thank you note that you send afterwards. You can reiterate that in the appreciation you get when you get that callback, and that excitement that you showcase. All of those small points lead up to the confidence that the employer's having in each and every step that they put you through that interview process. So it's all those little small things.
Exactly. Thank you so much. What hiring trends should candidates be aware of right now?
I don't think there's any specific hiring trends that are very different than what we've seen in the past. The only
Because
thing that
of the AI and the new era that we are in, maybe we can
Yeah,
talk
I
about.
still don't think that actually changes the landscape too much in regards to hiring trends. AI is, like I said, it's a tool on the candidate side, but it's also a tool on the recruiter side, right? The recruiter side still has that human touch where they are personally reviewing aspects that, because AI is not perfect on that side yet, right? And AI can tend to miss or filter out things that are unintentional. So recruiters are very diligent about that. In all the conferences I've spoken at or attended, all the recruiters have all said the same thing, that they're not solely relying on AI. So, what we've seen is a little bit of we're still in that normalization period post-pandemic,
And
where we saw,
recently, because of the economic situation and tariff and lots of
yeah,
problems, yeah.
yeah, we're still seeing a little bit of that, where we're seeing, like, because I mean, but this is nothing new. Like, economy influences hiring trends in any generation, in given decade, depending on the employment rate, depending on what the economic CPI index looks like, could mean whether employers are ready to invest in building and expanding, or whether they're scaling back. So, keep searching the market, keep putting your best efforts forward, keep being prepared. And like I said, inevitability, it will happen.
Thank you. How do you recommend job seekers stay competitive in today's market?
Very good question. So I think when you're talking about staying competitive, you want to, like, that comes with your preparedness, right?
Yeah.
We talked about what goes into that, and just being fully prepared for every opportunity that you put your effort towards is going to make you a highly competitive candidate seeker. We talked about being undeniable, right? You can't change the experiences that you've had. You can speak to them eloquently, you can speak to them confidently. What you can change is how you're going to be prepared for those opportunities when they come about. That's the only thing you can change at the moment. So change that, be prepared as much as possible, put forward the effort will be rewarded.
Interesting. Yeah. Do social media, it is a really nice question that I think we can talk about it. Do social media profiles like LinkedIn, Instagram, and etc. affect hiring decisions? And actually, do you ever check personal profiles?
So I don't personally check personal profiles because my personal preference is I think that's a breach of privacy. Like, they're applying for a job, they've gone through the channel of applying for a job. I'm looking at their resume. That's it. I've never had a situation where someone's social media profile has influenced or negatively influenced a hiring decision to date. But I will say, I would always be cautious or recommend caution to anyone as to how they show up on their social media platforms, whether that's LinkedIn or otherwise. What you put out there is once it's out there for public profile, for public view, it's out there forever. Even if you take it down, like, someone can probably dig it up. So be careful about what you put on there, and be careful about how you show up, because you never know if it's going to come back to haunt you sometime later on in the future. And you would hate for something, that you did when you were silly and young and weren't really thinking, for it to affect you later on as a established professional later in your career.
Exactly. If you look here, I have put on the pro tip regarding digital dirty footprint. It is very important that, and sometimes it is difficult to clean it.
Yeah, absolutely.
So they should be very careful in this regard. With jobs changing rapidly, how do you assess a candidate's readiness for future challenges?
Well, I think you want to be able to understand what the market is, right? So we talked about the adaptability and flexibility earlier, and I kind of referenced this towards ChatGPT, right? Like, I come from a generation, and for my younger viewers out there who might view this, I can remember a time before the internet, as crazy as that might seem, right?
Yeah.
At the time when that happened, when the internet was first invented and it was first coming out and was first being integrated within our day-to-day lives, but in business and in education, there was a lot of fumbling around as to, like, how will this help? And a lot of people were also very resistant towards it, where they're like, oh my God, this is going to replace jobs, and this is going to replace skills, and people were very fearful of it. But the people who took the time to understand it, to learn it, and to start to see how it was taking shape, were the best benefactors of that skill of using the internet. ChatGPT is no different. ChatGPT is the exact same in the sense that there's fear in how it's going to change the landscape. I have no doubt it will change the landscape for everybody. It's still kind of undetermined in regards to how, but it's been around for a little while, more behind the scenes. But the one thing I would say is get comfortable with it, get to know it, practice it. You can, like, even if you were to go on YouTube and actually look up how to use ChatGPT, you will find thousands of videos. And once you get used to it, it's not nearly as scary as it might seem, and it could help you in the future.
Exactly. I totally agree with you. What emerging skills, we talked about AI literacy, data skills, emotional intelligence, are becoming more important in your hiring process?
So I think, when you're talking about emerging skills in industry in general, like AI is obviously the most prevalent one right now. The softer skills have always been important. Like you're talking about emotional intelligence, critical thinking, things like that. Those are timeless. Those are classic. They're never going to go away. You always need to have those. Companies are always looking at big data, so business intelligence, that's another key aspect that companies have been looking into for quite some time already and will continue to play a factor even beyond AI. So I wouldn't say, I think AI is probably the most pressing of our time right now as we talk through this. I don't know where that's going to lead just yet as to what the new trends will look like. But all I would say is like, if you're interested in understanding what those trends look like, do some research, go into YouTube, go into some research channels, and you'll find that you'll be able to find some really cool information about what companies are looking into.
Okay. How do you promote equity in hiring candidates from underrepresented groups?
It's a good question, and it's one that's a little bit of a taboo question because I think it's not necessarily the what, but it's the how. So when we're talking about equity, the equity is about equal opportunity, not equal outcome, right? So when we're talking about equity of opportunity, we're saying that when I post a job and we're considering candidates, it's the best person for the job, regardless of any challenge or obstacle being of underrepresented groups, of any type of quote unquote bias that may or may not exist. I'm giving everyone an opportunity free of barrier and free of challenge. When you start to see companies target hiring for underrepresented groups, that's when it becomes a little bit problematic. And the reason I say this is because you're not necessarily like you're trying to hire the best person and you're trying to provide equal opportunity. When you're bypassing that to say, I need to fill this report card to hire for these representations, that becomes, it never ends just there, because then the next representation comes about and the next and the next, and then there's going to be even more obscurity in regards to your hiring process. The best advice I can give any organization or any hiring manager is free up your process of any bias, free up your process of any challenge or obstacle, make it as intuitive and as easy as possible to have consideration for everybody, no matter what the challenge might be. And so long as they meet the qualifications of the role, they get consideration. That is the
Exactly.
best piece of advice I would be able to give.
Exactly. Do you believe cultural ad is more important than cultural fit? Why?
So I guess it really depends on what we mean by cultural ad. The cultural ad is inclusive of a cultural fit, right? Again, when we're talking about culture, we're talking about the organization's culture, not ethnic culture or anything of that sort, right? So can someone bring value to your organizational culture? Absolutely. Your culture is ever flowing as an organization. It's ever changing. It's going to be anchored in those foundation cultural values that you have listed on your corporate website and that you live in how you do business. But individuals that you bring into that organization can definitely add to that and can definitely add it for the better into the more immediate and long term, meaning it could change.
Exactly. Okay. Have you ever regretted a hiring decision? What did you learn from it?
Absolutely, I did. This is like, you hope that through your process and through the individuals involved that you're getting it right. But there have been times, and I'll admit I've been burned, where there have been times I've hired the wrong person. They did all the right things, they said all the right things, they conduct themselves all the right ways, and you fast forward a few months after the fact, and you come to realize they're nothing like what they represented. That happens all the time. It happens with any company. I I'd be hard pressed to see any hiring manager or any recruiter or any HR professional say that they have never been burned once before in this. It has happened. What I learned from it is, be more diligent. Like, if and you gotta, there's a lot of checks and balances you go through when you're going through the interview process, and you do it with, you know, your peer group, you do it with hiring manager conversations and feedback loops. But there's always that little intuition that sometimes can happen where you're not getting like there's that little voice in your head that might be saying like, maybe there's something still off. And if that's the case, be diligent. Continue to explore what that is and why, and seek it out.
Yeah, thank you. How does your team decide between potential and experience when hiring?
Well, I think what, you know, like I said, your experience you can never change. You've already had that experience, right? How you present it, it matters more so than what the experience is
But
almost.
yeah, when you see that I have the potentiality to grow,
Yes.
and yeah.
Yeah. So, and that's what I was getting at is what you've been able to demonstrate in how you answer those questions will give me the opportunity to understand whether you have strong potential. Because whether it's a conversation you can show that you've adapted, whether it's the conversation you can show that you've got into, say, uncomfortable territory and learned from it and still brought value, that shows potential. So those are the areas that we are able to decipher through the hiring process.
Yeah. How do you determine if a candidate is coachable or has long-term potential? Continue
Well,
of the same question, even if they lack
yeah.
some of the required experience.
Well, I mean, like you never really fully know, right? Like you get that you get a snapshot of what this could be during the interview process, and you won't really know until the person's in the job and how they interact with you and how they learn and how they take feedback, etc. But during the process, like, you know, again, it's how you communicate your experiences that will allow the recruiter to figure out, can this individual be adaptable? Can this individual be versatile in how they approach different situations? That shows potential.
And will you report to the, for example, the managers or hiring in this regard that this was the main reason that I have chosen this person or not?
Yeah, there's definitely components of that. Like, I mean, they have to be able to meet the minimum qualifications for sure, right? But there have been numerous conversations I've had in my career where I talk with the hiring manager, I talk with even my executives and be like, you know, this person has demonstrated an incredible, not only experience, but has a wealth of potential. And I think that they can not only, once they are successful in this job, I feel like they can be successful in other opportunities within this company.
Okay, thank you. Do you ever reconsider past candidates for new roles? What makes you go back and reach out to someone you didn't hire the first time?
Absolutely. So if you recall an example I mentioned earlier where it could come down to a really tough decision, like where there's two great candidates and I have to pick one. It doesn't mean that the other one that I didn't pick was a bad candidate by any stretch. And I've even told those candidates, hey, listen, if something comes up, I'm definitely going to be reaching out to you. And I've done exactly that. And that has happened where I reach out to them. I see if they're still interested in coming to join the company. And in some cases, it's been months or if not years later. And we pick up that conversation and oftentimes it's been successful.
And it shows that even if we are rejected, we should be very careful and respectfully
Absolutely.
follow up, and this is very important.
Agreed.
What advice do you have for candidates who are tempted to fill gaps? We talked about it in the first question, or tweak the truth to seem more competitive. How can they handle their situation or gaps more honestly and effectively without hurting their chances?
Well, I would say, first of all, never tweak the truth, because, similar to the social media aspect, something you say or how you present and or tweak the truth, now could potentially come back to haunt you later on. So always be honest and act with integrity, by being factual and being honest about your information and about your experience. If you have gaps, talk them through, and be honest about them. If you have, like, I had an individual recently where we were talking about putting data-driven metrics into their resume, And we said, unless you can tell me exactly how this data is coming about, don't put it in. Put in only what you can defend from every possible question, from every possible angle. Because if you say, hey, I improved this process by 35%, okay, how did you do it? Be prepared to answer that question. Who was involved? What was your specific involvement? Be prepared to answer every single question. Do not just tweak the truth or fill gaps in your resume.
Okay, thank you. How do you detect when a candidate may be exaggerating or misrepresenting their qualification in a resume or interview?
Yeah. Exactly how I answered in the previous question. This segued perfectly into this one is, if they can't, because if I see certain percentages and data-driven metrics in their resume, I'm most definitely going to ask them, especially if it's something very significant, where like I improved engagement by 65%. That's incredible. How did you do that?
Because I have seen lots of tutorials and lots of people say that write measurable. I have seen some resumes, in each line they have written 20%, 10%, 50. I said that, okay, what it shows. Because this is a kind of cliche. Maybe in one line you can add one rate, but not all the lines you say that I did this. Okay, go on, please.
Yeah, you're 100% right. So I would say, one or two are perfectly fine. But again, if you have to be able to defend what those metrics are and what you specifically did. Because if you were part of the team that achieved that result, okay, that's perfectly fine. Position it that way then. Don't say I did this, but add a small part to play, if any at all. Make sure that you can accurately defend every statement in your resume when challenged on it, because chances are you will be challenged on it. Now, in the event if I challenge you on it and you're able to speak through it in eloquently and detailed, I know that you it's a lived experience. I know that I have confidence in what you're speaking to. But the moment that you can't do it, and if you're stalling on it or you're talking around the issue, well, now your integrity is being called into question, your authenticity is being called into question, and likely I'm not going to consider you. In my mind, that interview is already done.
Okay, thank you. How do you view candidates who seem overly eager or desperate? I mentioned previously begging to get the job. Where is the line between showing genuine interest and appearing too needy?
Well, I think you never want to come across as desperate, right? Because one of the things that there's a cliche that says the interviewer wants confidence in that the candidate is running to something versus running from something. If you're running from the fact of your current employer that you just cannot stand, that I cannot wait to get out, you don't want to position it that way. If you're running from the fact that you're tired of being unemployed and you really want something, well, we all understand that, but you don't want to come across as overly eager or too desperate. You want to be confident in the value that you bring, and you do so with a calm and with an appreciation, but you avoid sending them constant emails or constant LinkedIn messages. You just want to respect, you put forward, like, say, one effort by sending an email or sending a LinkedIn contact. If they don't respond, leave it at that. If and start to move on. You do not want to send repeats messages or emails.
Okay, thank you. Oh my God, there are lots of questions because I want to talk about the reference check.
Sure.
Totally. How do you approach reference checks during hiring process? At what stage do you usually contact references? What do you typically look for, and how much influence do those conversations have on your final decision? Also, what advice do you have for candidates, especially newcomers or career changers, when choosing who to list as a reference? If a candidate was let to go, fired, unfortunately, from a previous job, and their former manager is either unavailable or not the best person to provide a reference, how should the candidate handle this situation when listing references?
Sure. So there's a few parts I'll address here. So first of all, reference checks are done in every process, right? And they're only done at the time when an offer is presented, right? I'm not going to do reference checks for candidates I'm not making an offer to, because that's not the point. So at the time of an offer done, it's usually contingent on the successful reference check and maybe even background checks, depending on the job. So I would say they're important in that regard. Usually it's about 3 references. And I would always suggest having at least one person that was your manager, maybe a colleague, or even a manager from a different division that can speak to your experience. You would never put in a bad reference, so I hope that's never the case. It has happened though. So when you're choosing your list, choose it. And again, if you're a new student or a new grad, maybe a couple of your professors might agree to be your reference in that regard. If you're volunteering, maybe those individuals who are running the volunteer workshops might be able to agree to that reference. Now, to address your question about, okay, so what if you were let go and your direct manager isn't the person that can be your reference? Well, chances are you've made relationships with others in that organization. Reach out to your network within those people that you worked with and ask them, would they be agreeable to be a reference to you in that regard? So that is typical. That can happen.
Okay. And about the newcomers, I think that also their previous colleagues or managers in their home country,
Yes.
They can mention the time for contact and the translator,
Absolutely.
something like this. It can work too.
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you. And would you be willing to share an example of a strong resume and, if possible, a weaker one as well? Seeing the contrast would be incredibly helpful for our audience to understand what makes a resume stand out or fall short. Actually, you have sent me a sample I will show here, and you can talk about, okay, what's the difference, and thank you so much in this
Absolutely.
regard.
So let me just quickly speak to these. So the resume on the left, now it's not a horrible resume. And it's oftentimes, when I'm looking at, like when I say I get 200 resumes in a given job posting, I will see about half of them that look like this on the left. So John Smith, you can see, he's had a wealth of experience. Again, not horrible, but it can definitely be improved. And what we're seeing here is it's a very compact, condensed, it's not very easy to read, right? It's you're seeing there's a lack of space or use of space. We're seeing some areas where the fonts don't really align. And then when we look to the right, we're seeing a much cleaner version of John's resume. It's the same information. It's the exact same content. And what we've done is we've made better use of space. He's created a couple of columns. He's spaced out his information. He's put in some some color into it. He's put in some visual into it. So I would say where you can be creative, that's where it's going to stand out. Now, when you're we talked about earlier, where we said if you put in your resume in ChatGPT and ask for some suggestions, you can even download the resume. Well, this is the limitation of ChatGPT right now, where if you ask it to download, based on its recommendations, it's going to download something similar, very similar to the one on the left. What I would suggest is take that template and then go onto Google and just type in resume templates, right? You're going to see some pretty creative but professional looking resumes like the one on the right that is very clean, that's very easy. You can either download it if it's free, and if it's not, recreate it quite easily just by looking at it and putting some time and effort in Word. But the one on the right is a better use of space. It's very easy to read. It can tell you, I can probably skim this resume in 10 seconds flat and put them into the yes column because it's that easy to read, and it made it much easier for me as the recruiter to make sense of the content within his resume.
I totally agree, but my question is regarding ATS system that they sometimes mention that avoid putting pictures, colors, tables, because some ATS system cannot have proofread in this regard. What is your idea in this regard? I mean,
Yeah.
can we have the same style, but in a simple way.
Listen, you can like there. It's all really a matter of preference, to be quite honest. You can choose to structure it this way or similar, or even without color and graphics and tables. All of it is perfectly fine. It really depends on your comfort level. I would say the notion of not having color or avoiding tables because the ATS system can't read it is 100% myth. Okay. When, as I mentioned, when you're applying, you're not applying and submitting your Word version, you're submitting your PDF version.
PDF.
That
yes.
PDF version is locked. It means it cannot be edited. So once it's in there, it's going to, when you go through the ATS application process, you can actually get your information filled into the ATS from your PDF. And on the end user, as the applicant, or as the recruiter, sorry, I'm going to click on the image of the file that you submitted, and it's going to bring up that clean, unedited version of a PDF of your resume. So it's going to look exactly the way you submitted it. That's the notion to consider.
Thanks for clarification again. Okay. And the last question, is there any additional advice or key insight you think applicants should know about resume, cover letters, job applications, or interviews that we might have missed in our discussion?
No, I don't think so. I mean, I think one aspect that we covered a lot of different areas in this conversation, and I think I'm hoping people will get value out of it. I think maybe one last suggestion would be, so what I typically do if I was in a position to search for a job is, so I have my Word version, I have my PDF version of my resume, I have my cover letter, even though I may not, I admit I don't really use it or have it. But there's one other aspect I have, which is I have an email version of that's much more succinct of my cover letter. And the reason I have this is sometimes you might see a job posting where it actually will give you the email address of the recruiter who's accepting emails. Send the email, attach your resume. The body of the email can act as your cover letter. You simply paste that in there and away you go. The last thing I will say is when you're looking for a job, make it a habit. So every day you should be looking on the same 2 or 3 websites. Go on Indeed, go on LinkedIn, things of that sort, where you can, and every day it will show you the jobs that you haven't seen from the previous day before. You spend a little bit of time applying for those jobs. Your job is, your application is, your time to apply is now done for the day. You should be able to apply for at least anywhere between 3 to 10 jobs, depending on the type of job you're looking for, a week. So you save those, you put them in there, be diligent, do this every single day. It will take you no time to get some responses.
Thank you. Talking about the platforms like Indeed, which one do you recommend? I mean, we are not going to advertise any platform, Job Bank, because it is a governmental platform, job banks, Indeed, I don't know, lots of them, or LinkedIn. Which one do you recommend?
I mean, I think the 2 biggest ones that will capture all of them are going to be LinkedIn and Indeed, right? So when you go on LinkedIn, many companies will post there, but not all companies post there. Indeed is a great site because even if the company decides not to advertise their job other than their own career site on their own website, Indeed will pull from there. So those 2 websites alone will give you a wealth of job listings to explore the market. Going into the job banks and going into other avenues is never hurtful. I would say explore as many opportunities as you can to search for as many jobs as you can. But even just relying on those 2 alone, Indeed and LinkedIn, are perfectly fine.
But I totally recommend going to the website, the real website, because you can trust them much better. Okay?
Agreed.
Do you agree?
Absolutely.
Really, Michael, I don't know how to thank you. I appreciate it a lot. This was the impactful and the meaningful video that I have had in my mind to create and publish and share with the followers. I hope that they also have enjoyed it. And really, I myself enjoyed a lot. I learned a lot. Thank you so much. And at the end, if you have anything to mention, it is welcome. Thank you so much.
No, I appreciate your time as well. I welcome the opportunity to speak with you today and to go through it. So I'm hopeful that anyone watching sees and receives some value of the points that we made, and maybe learn some areas that they didn't think of before, and helps them in their search, helps them in the process. And again, I had fun. It was great. So I appreciate the time, and thank you very much, Akbar. It's always great.
Thank you so much. And as I mentioned here, if you really love the video, please leave your comments, questions, suggestions in the comment section below the video. Your feedback not only helps us improve future videos, but also supports other viewers and job seekers who benefit from seeing the different perspective. And maybe in the future we can have other videos with you, Michael, other questions, or other hiring manager if they wish, we can have it. Thank you so much, Michael. Thanks for everything.
Thank you. I appreciate it. I had a great time.
And the last question again, the first question. If the clients want to be in contact, we will put them in the job description. But anyway, if you have anything to add, please.
Yeah, so you can reach out to me on LinkedIn. You'll be able to easily find me there. And if you want to research my company, it's Synchros HR Professional Advisory Services. So you can find that at synchros.net. We'll have the link in the video description as well. And if you're interested in any type of HR professional advisory services, my organization can help out in any way that we can.
Thank you so much, and have a good day. Bye.
Thank you. Take care.
Really, I appreciate you. Thank you so much. It was
No,
great.
no problem. It was fantastic.
Really,
it was really good.
You did great job. Thank you so much.